Hello and welcome everyone. This is Dmitry and we are having another network programmability stream. And today we have a very special guest with me. It's Carl Montanari. And hi, Carl.
Hey, thanks for
Um,
having me.
and we will be discussing his library, the library that he released recently called Scrapli. We'll be playing with it. We'll be discussing it. We'll be taking questions from you folks. So thanks for joining me, Carl. And why don't we start with a brief introduction? Tell us a little bit about yourself.
Sure, I can do that. Carl Montanari, I guess kind of traditional network engineer background. I was in the military, did some healthcare stuff, did some consulting stuff, and eventually kind of started getting into Python for just automating whatever, and kind of just ran with it from there. And now I'm working at Packet Fabric as an NRE, so network reliability engineer, doing all of the Python things. And I decided that I would build a screen scraping library, I guess, and here we are.
Because we don't have we don't have enough of that, right? We need more.
I guess so. I
Just
don't.
kidding.
I don't think I have a good answer for that.
Yeah. In your current role, do you do a lot of network engineering or mostly writing applications?
Pretty much zero network, really anything outside of
Mhm.
the automation side. So we have a really, really, really good team of network engineers and architects, and kind of at least my view of the NRE role is just making them be able to do whatever it is that they want to configure a bajillion times faster or against a bajillion times more devices in a repeatable, testable, spoolable way. So
Got it. Okay. So yeah, I just wanted to know about that because it's kind of weird right now to see this market where, network engineer role, you need to know all networking technologies plus Python and all of that and be, I don't know, software developer with 5 years of experience or whatever. It's kind of weird
yeah,
because I have this also different view that those are really separate roles, like doing network engineering and doing building applications that are talking to network. So yeah, I was very curious what exactly you were doing and like how much of networking, uh, does that and all. Because in my current role, I also barely do any networking. Um, I still remember something, but I don't I don't do much networking these days.
yeah.
Um,
Yeah, I've been talking a lot about this with my boss lately, and we've been kind of thinking about like I keep saying, I don't want to do two things okay. I'd rather just do just the network automation part rather than try to be even half decent at networking and then just be not good at two things instead of good at one thing. So
Absolutely.
thankfully, I've been able to focus, which has been really nice.
Absolutely. And also the way I see it, that network automation is such a big field, also like unexplored really. I mean, people are exploring it, but it's not really mature, I guess. Like there are so many ways to interact with devices. There are also a lot of questions unanswered, like what is the best way to achieve that?
Yeah,
Mostly about like, especially when you touch like multiple vendors, right? Like how do you build proper automation for that, like really proper stuff. Uh, Even if it's API based, right? It's kind of weird when you have to translate some of your intent to multiple vendor operating systems.
yeah. The whole promise of the open config and everything like that hasn't really panned out in my experience. Like the idea is cool, but I work with Cisco and Juniper stuff, and I'm stuck using vendor specific models. So it's like, well, we didn't really get very far with that, I guess, but progress, I guess. So better
Yeah.
than nothing.
So, do you also touch any other platforms besides Cisco Juniper at your work
Uh,
or
Not right now. Well, I guess we have some other kind of stuff, but that hasn't really been a focus for me. So it's really just Cisco and Juniper, kind of my
got
day to day stuff.
and on Cisco side, is it like specific platform or all of them like XC, XR?
just XR for us right now. Yeah.
Just XR. Okay.
My background is much more data center, so XOS, ISOC, obviously. That's
Got
Arista stuff. Like
Okay, cool. So since we touched a little bit on Yang,
that.
tell me what you think about it, and what's your experience have been so far? Why don't you
It feels
like
like
it?
a loaded question. Yeah. Um, man, I, yeah, I don't love Yang. I tell you that. I don't love NC Client. That's really the thing I don't love, I think. Um, yeah, I think Yang is all right. And as more I've gotten into it and polling, really I've focused on the polling side, not so much configuration side with Yang at this point. And not streaming telemetry, just actually polling, at least as of right now. The more I've gotten comfortable with it, the more I like it, but I definitely wouldn't say I love it. I would much personally rather have uh, just like a RESTful API, treat everything like kind of the Cumulus model, treat everything like Linux. You got flat files and you can pull whatever. Um, that would be my preference, but Yang's growing on me, I guess I'll say, but I'm definitely not prepared to say that I'm a big, huge fan at this point.
Got it. Have you had any experience with RESTConf in particular, or not? Not so much.
Not in production, but just like lab stuff, I like it more just because like working with requests is a significantly better experience than working with NC client to me at least. So at the very least, that's something
Yeah.
I would prefer. But then and JSON's nice, but I have really, really, really come to have a much higher appreciation of XML. XPath is ridiculously powerful. I never thought I would say that because I was like, oh, JSON is just so much prettier and easier, and it's just like a Python dictionary, and it can be made a Python dictionary, and it's so easy. XML is crazy powerful, so definitely more appreciation there.
Yeah, actually, it's funny you mentioned that because I started feeling the same way, and specifically after my last stream when I was trying to build this REST confish thing, where when you want to go like deep in your data, right? Like RESTconf feels kind of weird. Specifically, I mean, not RESTconf, JSON feels kind of weird where you have so many nested levels. And specifically, if you know that some levels may not exist, right? At some point, with XPath, you can get pretty much anything you want, as long as you understand the syntax. And
Yep.
there is a lot of struggle with that too, right? But yeah, it's interesting that like technically it should not matter because it's just a data format, but then in your code it actually kind of matters as well, right? Like from typical examples that you cannot convert from XML to JSON without some extra information, right? Like there is no one-to-one mapping, so that's kind of weird. Pocket Ferret, thank you so much for gifting the sub. All right, let's move to talking about another screen scraping, I guess. So give us a little bit of history and on the scrapli. You already mentioned some of it, but let's talk a little bit more deeply and also mention some of the like how that library was called because I don't remember anymore. Uh, because you had another library, right? Which
Yeah,
is a
yeah,
background for scrapli, which is like first iteration, I would guess.
yeah, yeah. So I was working for Kirk Byers for a while, and so obviously a big part of that job was contributing to and maintaining netmiko, and there's a lot going on there, obviously. So at one point I was like, I don't think I understand the guts of this enough. Um, So I want to try to just like build like a really like low scale replica of netmiko so that I can kind of understand what's happening really, really low level, as opposed to just, like, okay, I can add a driver and I can send configs and I can do whatever. So I started uh, with SSH2 Python because I didn't want to use netmiko, because then I figured I would end up kind of just copying like exactly. So I wanted to have something that would kind of force me to like have to think about it and be kind of go my own way a little bit,
Mm-hmm.
Um, so yeah, I started kind of I don't even remember what I call it, SSH to net, I think, just because SSH to Python. And it never really was anything other than kind of like a tool to kind of help me get more familiar with netmiko. Uh, and then yeah, earlier this year, I guess, it's kind of when I was like, hey, that was actually pretty cool, and I think I can make it into something kind of neat. Uh, so I kind of took some of the ideas, and I wanted to use SSH2 because it's really fast. Uh, and I started Scrapli. Um, or maybe there was something else called something else in there somewhere,
Was
but
it?
that's kind of like the
Yeah, I will
rough,
interrupt you
rough
for a
idea.
second. Since you
Yeah.
mentioned SSH to Python, I do mind giving yours more background on this, like
Yeah.
why it's a big deal, I guess. Because I do feel
Yeah.
like it's a big deal.
So unfortunately, the main project seems to kind of not be being maintained, which kind of sucks because it really is cool. But basically, it's a really small, thin wrapper around libSSH2, so C library. Uh, so obviously, really, really fast because it's in C, and it's a very thin kind of wrapper, which is cool because it kind of gets you all the way down to libSSH2, which is at least going to do most kind of normal SSH operations. Obviously, connect and send data and receive data and stuff at the very least. Uh, and because it's written in C, it's obviously really fast, which is quite nice. I think you got on the screen there the SSH2 versus paramiko, like time thing. And SSH2 is really, really, really fast. Uh, and that was why I kind of picked it to start. It's just one, it was something different than paramiko, and two, I was like, I'm just going to try to build this as fast as I possibly can because why not? Who doesn't want to go fast,
but people say that being fast doesn't matter in network automation. You can use
Yeah, I mean,
Ansible and you will finish everything in 5 years. Your script finishes running in 5 years, but that's fine because it's automated, no?
yeah, I plead the fifth. Yeah, on one hand, I somewhat agree about the speed. It doesn't need to be the fastest thing in the world, but obviously, if you're just leaving something on the table, uh, and it's just not fast, and you're not trying to optimize it, I don't think that's good, right? So like, I think it should be as fast as possible. But when we get to the point of like, oh, is it Python's too slow? We need to write it in Rust or Go or something. I think the trade-off there of complexity or broad industry understanding, like for normal network folk like us, like I don't know Go or Rust. I could probably hack my way through some stuff, but I would say that the slowness of Python versus those things makes Python better. All of that said, obviously, don't be slow for slow sake.
Right. Uh, I mean, in general, I can't. Packet Ferret didn't take 15 minutes before Ansible shade arrived. Dude,
Yeah.
you can wake me up at night and just ask, tell me one reason not to use Ansible, and I will just keep going until end of another day. Um, but I also hear this quite often about the like speed doesn't matter, and I think it doesn't matter that much, but only as a in isolation, if that makes sense. Like if this is the only thing, right, then probably you could compromise if you have like consistency and like idempotency and some of other things, reliability of your application, but you don't get any of that with Ansible really.
Yeah.
So that then why would you want to go slow doing kind
Yeah.
of the same unreliable automation but slower, much slower? And then
Yeah. In
um
YAML. Great.
in YAML. Yeah, but yeah, since this stream probably is not about Ansible, though it has never stopped me talking talking about it in the bad way. So let's let me reiterate what Carl said here, that something like netmiko, well, netmiko is based on paramiko, right? And paramiko, does it use any C bindings? I don't remember.
I don't think so.
Or they implement SSH in Python itself.
Yeah, as far as I know.
Yeah, I think this is what they do. So they implement actually CryptoPart and the protocol. I think for crypto they use like some Python crypto stuff, but they really implement SSH protocol on their own in Python. Now with something like SSH to Python, they have C bindings to the library, and it's very fast. And then when I used, let's say, netmiko, and when I have tried scrapli, I was really amazed by the speed difference, because those are two layers of abstraction on top of, well, now that I say this out loud, it's not really correct, but we'll talk about this later, but right, because you can have different transport in scrapli. But if you're using SSH2 in something like scrapli, netmiko and paramiko are another level of abstraction. And there are some other differences going on in implementation of those, right, that make something like scrapli perform better. But we'll talk about that, I guess, a little bit later. So, folks, just to give you some perspective, for some of my netmiko versus scrapli scripts, I had the last test, I think, was with 10 devices in threads, was 10 seconds with netmiko and less than a second with scrapli or something like this. We'll probably retest it today, but yeah, so the difference is really significant. And going back to that discussion of that speed doesn't really matter, when your application allows that kind of speed, like 10x increase or I don't know 50x increase in speed, obviously, you know, it just feels better when you can get to your result faster, but it also enables some application that were not really possible before. Typical examples that I like to give is with network diagram or something. If you are doing it with slow tools, the only real way to do it is to have a job queue, right? So, you know, you click on a web page or something, then it's being sent to your job queue, and then once the worker is ready, that is going to be run. Let's say it runs 5 minutes or so. Probably you would want to cache that result for I don't know how much, and then return it. So that kind of like a synchronous way of dealing with your web page, because when you click, nothing really happens. The result will come much later, right? And when you have these faster tools, faster underlying libraries, what you can do is you can actually do it synchronously with your click on the button, right? You click on the button, it actually goes to your, I don't know, whole network, and returns result within like what the time that user expects. So it enables some of these use cases which are not really possible when your stuff is running slow. All right, cool. So you were talking about when SSH to net, and then you decided to build this based on your experience from that. You decided to build Scrapli, but it wasn't called that way. Do you remember how it was called before? Was it
Yeah, there was
NSSH or
NSSH was there in some point.
NSSH?
There's a couple kind of false starts of this,
So what
couple
happened with
iterations.
that?
Uh, I think at one point I was like building it, and I was just so frustrated that I made some kind of stupid new mistakes, and had like I was trying to do too much and be too clever, I guess. And I realized at one point that I had made just too many mistakes, and I wasn't that far off. You know, like
Hmm.
I wasn't that far in, so I could just start from scratch. And so that's what I did, and I think that was a good decision.
Right. And if I remember correctly, it's the reason there was a rename because there was suggestion
Yeah,
that it doesn't necessarily need to use SSH, right?
yeah. So you and I talked about it, and and I was so tunnel vision on like SSH2 and whatever. And then we were talking, and especially I think at that time I had started trying to build the system transport, I think maybe. And at that point it was like, well, you're already doing all this kind of channel reading and writing stuff. Like it probably would be trivial to make it also support telnet, if nothing else. Telnet like
Right.
standard library, nice and easy. Uh, and so yeah, so that was happening like maybe January-ish. And I was like, okay, enough of this. Let's start from scratch and have like a kind of a clean slate. If I like before it was all just kind of science experiment stuff. And at that point I was like, I don't know, maybe this could be cool. Like to actually build for realsies, I guess I'd say. So it's kind of the rename and the kind of relaunch, I guess, if you will.
Mm-hmm. Got it. So wh- where would you mark the start of scrapli? What's your
I think like
that?
middle of junior is maybe like the first like scrapli release on Type. Yeah, it's like, really quick.
So
Somewhere in
this
that neighborhood, though, I think.
so technically scrapli is a really young project. Would you agree with that
Oh yeah,
assessment?
yeah.
Like,
Actually, so yeah, February 9th was actually the
oh
first Scraply
wow,
release. So yeah, it's. I
February.
was definitely working on it in January though.
So if it's February, is it like what, 3 months? No. Yeah, it's
Yeah,
just three
well, I don't
months.
even know what month it is. Yeah, yeah.
That
I've spent
that's
a
that's really
lot of
young
time.
project. Um, so tell me about the name because this is something you came up with, and I was kind of um I didn't have a strong opinion about that. I thought it definitely was better than NSSH, but I
Yeah,
didn't have a strong opinion on that. But honestly, it's growing on me. Like I kind of appreciate the irony right now. So, yeah, tell me a
yeah,
little bit more about that.
yeah. After we talked about the add in telnet or whatever else, I was like, well, crap, I can't put SSH in the name, so it doesn't work. And I was like, well, what am I do? What does it actually do? And like,
Mm-hmm.
really, all it's doing is screen scraping.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm not very clever, not very creative. So I said, well, I'm just going to take these two words that it does and squish them together into a funny sounding word. And then it was kind of too late to change it with any kind of better idea at any point. So I was like, well, I guess this is what we're calling
I like it. I like it now.
it.
Yeah, as I said, it's growing on me. So now let's talk about the library itself. So, what does it offer? And then next
Yeah.
question, why not netmiko? I guess.
Yeah, get right to it. So Scraply basically is what it sounds like, a screen scraping library. Uh, in focused for networking devices, though in theory you could use it for anything that you can SSH to. Uh, but that said, there's probably a better choice if you don't use it with Linux server. Ansible's plenty good at that, or Puppet or Chef or whatever. Probably a better option for that. So you could use it for anything SSH or Telnet, but again, focus on network stuff. And it's just kind of meant anything you can do as a normal human, typing away at your keyboard in a terminal to a network device. Scraply can be used to automate that with hopefully a well documented, well typed, well tested, kind of modern API. That's I'm biased, but those are the things that I've kind of been shooting for
Mm-hmm.
with Scraply. Scraply, why Scraply? I mean, the obvious downside is it's like, what do we decide? It's like 3 months old, so that's obviously a downside for Scraply. Um, I would say those things that I mentioned, right? Simple API. I think it's just kind of common sense. There's not a lot of magic going on. There's some magic in parts that I'm not super wild about, but I think it kind of needs to exist in order to make it useful to people.
Mm-hmm.
It's really well typed. So if you are using VS Code or Python or whatever, IDE auto completion and stuff, I think is really, really, really helpful. It's 100% my bias strict type checked, which has been a challenge at times, but I think the payout, it's paid out. It's been worth it. And it's really, really, really well tested. Maybe I wouldn't say well tested, but thoroughly tested.
Mm-hmm.
Um, so even without connecting to real devices, the way that the channel works, the way that we send data, the way that we read from the socket, basically, that's all tested in unit tests. So you don't even need like a virtual device or a real device to actually test that. The implementation of it, I got a little wet away from me, and it's not the best thing in the world, but I think there's a lot of value in that because it'll just prevent any kind of weird regression. So I think that's a pretty big benefit. And then obviously it's fast. we've talked about that a bit. With SSH2, it's I think maybe as quick as you're going to get in Python. I'm sure you can kind of cut some corners some places, but it's definitely fast.
Got it. So you and I already forgot what I wanted to say. I guess I will start with another thing. Um, so we mentioned SSH2, right? But that's not the only option there. So tell
Yeah.
us a little bit about that.
Yeah. So I built it to try to be modular and extensible and kind of like follow some, not like I have a real CS background or anything, but kind of try to follow some real CSE type patterns of single responsibility and things like that. I don't know that I succeeded, but I tried. But to saying all of that, there's basically three major components of Scrapli. There's a channel, which is just reading and writing over the SSH channel. There's more to it, but that's the rough kind of thing. Then there's drivers, which is basically like the implementation for ISXE or Junos or whatever, and handling like understanding privilege levels and disabling paging and all that kind of stuff. And then the last component, which may be the most kind of important, is the transport component. And the transport's job is to basically just present file-like interface to the channel. So what that means is, as long as anything that you can read and write to and provide a file-like read and write up to the channel, Scrapli can kind of work with. So basically, that means there's a paramiko transport, obviously for SSH. There's telnet lib, so standard library for telnet. There's SSH to Python, which we talked about. And then the last one is really kind of what's become the core focus of Scrapli for me is the system transport. And so this is a Linux only or Mac OS only kind of thing, POSIX system. In that we're basically literally acting just like a human would, you calling SSH on your terminal and basically doing our screen scraping automation through that, which sounds really, really, really atrociously bad, and it maybe is, but it gives us a whole ridiculous amount of flexibility. And if you don't like it, you can use paramiko or SSH2 or Telnet. So that's kind of the idea of the transports and the ones that exist at this point.
Right. So with that system one, you pretty much don't have any dependency, right? Well, your only dependency is open
Linux.
SSH client or something, right? Something like
Yeah.
that.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, it won't work on Windows as it stands for various reasons. Basically, we have to force a pseudo terminal in some scenarios to deal with password prompts and things like that. Some really in the weed stuff that I spent a lot of time on. But basically, yeah, any Linux shell that you have, anything bin SSH, we can operate on that.
Got it. And do you know if SSH2 works on Windows?
I believe it does. Yeah.
Okay.
Uh,
I haven't tested it
there,
because I never do anything on
there's
Windows, but I know that some of the
yeah.
viewers do.
Yeah, I know. I mean, I know paramiko works. There's just a ton of caveats because I don't have Windows. I have zero motivation or reason to have Windows.
Mm-hmm.
I don't have it at work, so it's not well tested. I have GitHub Actions that run like a limited set of unit testing on Windows latest GitHub Actions, which is really handy. But that's about the most that I test on Windows, and we skip a lot of tests, like all of the SSH config files, known host files, like all of that, because I don't want to deal with figuring out Windows paths and stuff like that. So I don't know if that stuff works on Windows. I think that part does. TextFSM, I know I've seen some stuff in like network code Slack lately. There's like the FNC fun control library is not available on Windows. It's like TextFSM 1.1 doesn't support Windows, I guess. So there's a lot of caveats with Windows, but in theory, scrapli works there.
Got it. Okay, so I guess we'll right now jump into doing some stuff with it. I think there is questions in the chat from Pocket Para. Do you see this project being the foundation for a plugin ecosystem? I'm curious if things like PyTS or JSnappy leverage this as a connection mechanism. So I can at least reply about PyTS stuff. I don't think it will become foundation for PyTS because they implement connections on their own. They don't even use paramiko. I think so. Unlikely with that, but Carl, what about the foundation for plugin ecosystem, and what are your thoughts on being that used for JSnappy?
I don't know anything about JSnappy, so I can't really comment there. And yeah, PyATS, obviously they have Unicorn, so I don't think this would be used there. All that said, like right now, paramiko and SSH2 Python are already plugins. So I could see maybe that's kind of going in the opposite direction of the question, but the idea for Scrapli would be able to support plugins for different kind of device types, outside of the core napalm platforms. Whether other people want to use Scrapli as a plugin for their things, PyTS or whatever, I don't know. I guess you could. I don't know of anybody using it for anything like that, but possible.
So tell me this, what are the currently operating systems that are supported? And next question would be, if it's not, what should I do to make it to make that support available via Scrapli?
So the core napalm platform, so Cisco, iOS /iOS XE, NXOS, iOS XR, Juniper Junos, and Arista EOS are all supported first class plugins, drivers, whatever you want to say. They're all tested against virtual devices in VRNet Lab. So like I said, testing is one of the things I've tried to kind of be adamant about. So every release, full test of everything against, their virtual devices, but they're real as in it's real EOS and everything like that. If your platform falls outside of those five, there's a GenericDriver, which basically provides send commands, those kind of methods, but has no concept of privilege levels or disabling paging. So that could be a challenge. So like, let's say it's I don't know, brocade switch, whatever. Like I assume brocade switch has it's similar kind of thing where you log in, and if you want to do any kind of automation, you got to say term like 0 or an equivalent brocade thing. To cope with that kind of thing, Scrapli has the concept of an on-open function. So basically, you can use a GenericDriver and then write your own custom on-open function that handles disabling paging, getting to their appropriate privilege level, any other kind of weird stuff like that, handling banners and prompts and stuff like that. And then from that point, you've written this function that's conceivably 5 lines, doesn't really have to do very much. At that point, you can use send commands just like you normally would. Alternatively, if you wanted like kind of the full-blown core driver behavior, you could basically extend the network driver abstract base class, and really it's very, very little that you'd have to do. Again, you'd have that on open function. You'd maybe have an on close function to like gracefully kind of wrap things up. And then the only other really major thing that you'd have to figure out would be the privilege levels of that device. So in iOS XE land, because that's kind of like what I know the best, you'd have exec, privilege exec, and then configuration. So you need to map those out and figure out what the prompt patterns are. If you have to escalate privilege from, let's say, exec to privilege exec, is there a prompt, and does that prompt have like a hidden character, like a password? Like if you had an enable secret password configured on iOS, and these privileges are it's just a class, and then you end up having a dictionary of classes that represent each of these privilege levels. And with that, which this is the magic kind of part of Scrapli that's a little bit too magic-y for me. But basically, after defining that on open and your privilege levels, the rest of Scrapli will just work as kind of normal. So I know that's kind of like a lot of words and stuff, and there's definitely like a learning curve for sure. But in theory, you just have to add those two things and extend a class, and off you go.
Yeah, so I will try to summarize this and correct me if I'm wrong somewhere, right? So
Sure.
we have our what's called generic driver, right? And we have our platform drivers, which are those five, I think, that you listed, right? And the purpose of that platform specific driver is to deal with specifics of the platform, but less on the actual prompt side and more of on like what is actually going on and what is needed to get to be able to automate stuff, right? Like I'm looking right now on this ISXC. Can you see my screen, by the way? Yeah,
Yep.
so I'm looking on ISXC. I see that for ISXC you go and do terminal like 0 and terminal widths, right? But also on ISXC you need to be aware of on what privilege level you are, right? For example, if you are not at how it's called, um, well, not in enable, right? You need to get to enable to like do some configuration stuff. But technically, if you like, if this driver didn't exist, right, you could still do some of that with generic driver, but you just have to be very aware of like what's going on, right? Like you would have to do enable yourself, for example, right? Stuff like that.
Yep, exactly. So yeah, generic driver, and there's even one kind of I just got a little bit of like Russian dolls or turtles all the way down or whatever you want to say. There's actually another class called scrape, which is like kind of the namesake for the whole library, and that's like the really core base of everything. And then the generic driver extends that. The network driver extends the generic driver, and then IO16 driver extends the network driver.
Mm-hmm.
So you could go all the way down to scrape where it's like it doesn't provide you any kind of concept of send command. You have to reach into the channel, which is another class, and that channel is responsible for actually reading and writing to the SSH session,
Mm-hmm.
or reading and writing to the transport, which is the third class. So if you wanted to, you could go all the way down to that. It has zero concept of privilege levels. It doesn't understand send commands. It only understands, I would like to send these bits down the channel. I would like to read from the channel. Then you could go to the generic driver, and that's like, okay, we're a little bit more kind of structured at this point. We understand prompts and we understand stuff like that a little bit, and we want to send a command. Okay, cool. We don't have any concept of configs. We don't have any concept of privilege levels, but we want to send a command. Okay, so you don't have to reach directly into the channel because that part gets abstracted for you at the generic driver level. And then the
Got
network driver says, okay, cool. Well, now I'm in network, kind of core mode. I need to care about privilege levels. I need to care about configuration modes and stuff like that. So it's just kind of builds on each other or builds on the previous class.
So I'm looking right now here on another piece, which is privilege levels, and so I see there are some regular expressions and some.
Yeah.
Do you mind telling me what this is?
Yeah. There's a lot of regular expressions going on. Yeah. So
Oh,
the
those
privilege
are all
levels.
regular expressions here?
Oh, no. Just each of the privilege levels
Okay.
has a regular. Let me pull it up too. So I idea about that.
Do I understand correctly that this allow you to understand where you are at any point in time?
Exactly. Yep. So each privilege level is an instantiation of a class called privilege level. Very creative.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and that privilege level in order here of the args that you see is the pattern. So exactly like you just said. How do I know when I'm in this privilege level configuration mode or exec or whatever? The next thing down would be the name. That's just like the friendly name for you and I to say, hey, scrapli acquire configuration mode, acquire exec. The next thing is previous privilege. So this is if I'm in configuration mode, for example, what's the previous privilege? What's the next privilege down? In Cisco world, privilege exec. Okay, fine. The next argument would be de-escalate. So how do I de-escalate from configuration mode to privilege exec? Like at end, probably most Cisco stuff, right? Escalate is the next one. Obviously, from configuration mode, there's really no escalation, so it's going to be an empty string or a false or whatever it is. And then the next one would be escalate off. So this would say, this is a bool that just says, if I escalate from this privilege to the next thing, or to this privilege from the previous one, is there a password prompt? Because obviously, if there's a password prompt, those characters aren't going to show up in the channel because they'll be hidden by the device. So we need to be aware of that. And then the last thing is the escalate prompt. So what is the actual prompt that you get prompted with when you try to go from exec to privilege exec? And you type enable, well, it's going to prompt you password. And so that one is another regular expression of what should I be looking for when you try to escalate. Hopefully that makes sense. This is the most magic part of Scrapli,
Yeah,
like a really, really, really long
and
way.
once you described it, I feel like I don't want to ever do it on like it sounds really complex, and I think it really is, right? Because this is where this platform specific stuff start showing up. Like how many different levels you have and how do you get from one level to another, kind of like this state machine, if you will, right? And you have to understand where you are and then understand where you want to be and get to that point, right?
Yeah, yeah. So there's actually so in theory, you could add any of your privilege. Like again, I'll just pick on Brocade because it came to mind. They could have 5 privilege levels, and as long as you built the dictionary of privilege levels appropriately, in theory, it would just work in Scrapli. So you wouldn't have to actually understand the guts of Scrapli about how it gets to and from and all of that kind of junk. But basically, yeah, I build a map of all privilege levels. So it basically says if you're in configuration mode and you want to get to every other privilege level, how do you do it? What's the path? And basically, that's how Scrapli does it, which is definitely magic-y, but in theory, or hopefully, it doesn't have to be touched like ever again, really. And it works obviously with all the core platforms. So there's at least that going for it.
Right. Okay. Cool. So tell me another thing. What challenges have you encountered when building the library? But I'm talking more about like on SSH front. So we already touched on some of these things, but I want people who are watching this to understand how bad SSH automation really is, I guess. Um,
It's good. I feel like we had to talk about this the other day. Like find yeah, I mean privilege level is probably like one of the bigger things. Kirk has a really, 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 really good blog post, I think called something along the lines of screen scraping it or netmiko and knowing what is done, I think is the name of the post. And if you don't think about it and you're not trying, if you're not like getting into the weeds, I don't know, at least for me, it wasn't immediately intuitive. Yeah, that's the one. What constitutes done. Yeah. So that's a really, really great post. Uh, and that probably sums up the basis of what's hard about this. But in general, as a human, you know when a command is done executing because you're sitting on the terminal and there's no more junk coming out of the terminal, or you're back at the base prompt, or you get some message that says everything's good. But as a robot, like that doesn't exist, obviously. And realistically, all we're really doing at the end of the day is reading from the socket. We're reading from a file descriptor, really. Uh, and there's challenges about like what blocks and what doesn't block and things like that. That's kind of even further down in the weeds, but the gist of this post from Kirk and like the idea is like, how do you know as a robot when the output is done and you're back to a good state where you can send another command or exit or do whatever. So that's probably like the main thing. The privilege level thing obviously was and is a big challenge. And like, how do you know what privilege level you are, and how closely do you track that state? Like a netmiko, for example, just exits configuration mode. Well, there's a flag to say don't exit basically, but it always exits configuration mode when you're done sending configs. Scrapli doesn't. So Scrapli will just stay in configuration mode because it's aware of every level in the privilege level chain. And so if you say, I want to send a config, it'll get in config mode, stay there, or do whatever you want, stay there. And then if your next thing is, I want to send a command, well, it's like, okay, well, I know about these states or these privilege levels. I can go to the next one. Handling that was a big problem. And then on the system transport, that's a whole other can of worms, because using telnetlib, paramiko, or SSH to Python, that's basically you're just reading and writing from somebody else's library, which is great. Paramiko is amazing. It does everything. Like, it's crazy. And the other libraries too, right? But when we start talking about the system transport, things get really, really weird, really, really fast, because now you're screen scraping out of like a process. You're reading from a pipe, you're reading from a file descriptor. You have to actually force a PTY instead of just use a pipe with a subprocess, because if you don't, the password prompt for a device is going to get prompted in a PTY or outside of the pipe, basically, and you'll never ever be able to catch the password prompt or enter the password. So it's like, those are probably like the main things. Yeah, okay. System got wild. Like, system transport got crazy.
Got it. Another thing that I want to cover is kind of like how NETMiko does it implementation wise and how you do it differently. And this, what I mean by that is, when I, let's say, use NETMiko in a bunch of threads, this is usually a very vivid one, right? When you use NETMiko in a bunch of threads, every so often I get something like an expected prompt was not found, or some kind of similar thing. So tell me a little bit more about why it might happen in NETMiko and why it barely happens in Scrapli.
Sure. So the NetMiko implementation is kind of governed by delay factors. That's the main thing. And then there's another widget called FastCLI. And FastCLI basically knocks delay factors down to like a really small amount, or it takes like the lowest of the configured delay factor, something. So what all of that said, basically NetMiko's reading X number of times. There's X number of loops that it will try to read from the socket or from the paramiko session. Scrapli doesn't do that at all. There's no concept. Time is imported in like one place, if that, in Scrapli. So we don't do time.sleeps ever. We don't do that anywhere. What we do instead is we just have infinite while loops that always read, and they're always just looking for the prompt. And in order to make sure that we don't just block forever and sit in that while loop, never finding what we want, which obviously could happen, we decorate all of the methods that would be potentially infinitely blocking with a timeout wrapper, basically. That's the gist of it.
Okay, so again, just I will try to summarize and put it in other words. So if I understood correctly, with NETMiko, you have these delays which are set up, like you can set up how many times you check the prompt, right, and what is the delay between these checks, and you'll kind of like, okay, do I let's say it's 5 seconds, right, just for example, and every 5 seconds I will check. Obviously it happens much faster in NETMiko, not 5 seconds, but just for example, every 5 seconds I will see if my prompt is what I expect it to be, right? And if not, I will keep going, right? And then until the timeout that you established, this is where it will like throw some, I don't know, either NETMiko, I think OS or whatever exception there is, right? But The
prompt
difference
opt down.
here is that in your library, you actually don't do that. You have an infinite loop there, correct? Looking for a
Yep,
prompt in infinite loop. But if you are if you hit the timeout, then you will crash at that point, right? So you don't have that timer mechanism. So what this really means is that it's a little bit more reliable, or more, maybe not even a little bit, because we don't depend on any timing mechanism. And this is actually super, it's very easy to notice when you have a bunch of threads, because if you have, let's say, hundreds of threads, right, then you may be on some of these threads, you may be, let's say, you may open a socket, but you don't do anything for like a bunch of time, because you have so many other tasks that you have to do, right? That you kind of like don't even have time for that one thing. So that one thread may go out of sync or something and just crash. So technically, this should not really happen if you have like proper timeout with scrapli, right? Just proper total timeout for a thing.
And the timeouts, I was really, I think it got more confusing than I wanted it to be, but I tried to be very like simple about the timeouts. There's 3 timeouts in Scrapli. There's a socket timeout, so that's basically like connection opening timeout. There's a transport timeout, so this is the timeout that governs the actual transport telnet lib system, paramiko, SSH to Python. So that's like, is the connection is the connection gone for 2 seconds, whatever. And then the kind of the most important one is the timeout ops, and that's the timeout that actually gets applied to that timeout wrapper that decorates the blocking methods, basically. And it's just a simple timeout in seconds. So if you say like, I need to run show tech on and Nexus 7K, it's going to take 600 years. Whatever. You could literally put 600 years, and Scrappy would just sit there and just wait and just keep reading, just keep reading. So there's no kind of fiddling around with, like delay factor kind of stuff. It's very clear. It's like 600 seconds. Okay, off you go. And then the other really important point is the second that Scrappy gets back, or the instant, not the instant Scrappy gets back to the prompt that it thinks it's supposed to be at, it exits. It doesn't wait for that timeout. So you could set this timeout to literally like 100 seconds or something, that should never really happen, to give you a really, really reliable connection, or really, hopefully reliable. And you could just wait. So maybe you have stuff connected via satellite or whatever. You just crank that ops timeout really, really high, and whatever, even if a show run takes 30 seconds on one device, but takes 3 seconds on the other, Scrappy's going to return the instant it gets whatever it needs, or wait up to the time and then raise an exception.
Got it. Okay, cool. So, if you folks ever encountered any errors in netmiko, especially regarding timeouts, especially in the threads, at that point you probably went to investigating how those timeouts work in netmiko, and then you would probably start changing delay factors and global delay factor and stuff like that. And it's very likely that even after tuning all of that, it still doesn't work like you expect. Yeah, it just, unfortunately, it's an implementation thing, right? And I found personally very hard to understand what exactly that delay factor and stuff like that affects, right? And there is even like other tuning parameter thing like max loops or something like that that goes even like what exactly that number is, right? Um, so that is kind of weird. So you don't even have any of that in Scrapli, because it behaves just okay. I will just try infinitely until I am out of time, pretty much.
Yep. Yep.
Okay.
Yeah, that was a really big focus. Was like, how do I do this? Where it's just like, give me the seconds to run. I don't want to futz around with anything else. So
Got it. Okay, there are
the only
some.
other weird thing that can happen there is like if the transport doesn't get anything, and like SSH2 closes the connection, because it's just a really, really slow connection. So you may, in some like kind of extreme situations, have to modify both of those values,
Mhm.
but usually it's just the timeout ops.
Okay, cool. There are some other big implementation detail thing that we want to cover, but probably once we get to the code, which I hope will be very soon. This regarding the response, right? And
Yeah.
response object, and yeah, but it's probably will be better once we actually get to the code rather than just keep talking about it. And I think just give me a second here. Um, hey, I just forgot my 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 thought here. I
I
think I
think the
think
only
we could
other thing while you're
just playing with it. And oh, while I will be start bringing some of the stuff here. Tell me a little bit more about. So you mentioned VR labs, right? Maybe some
yeah.
of the viewers don't know what it is, and so if you could describe it in a couple of words and why you use it for testing.
Yep, absolutely. So VRNet Lab is a project from Christian Larson that basically is used to spin up Docker containers with uh, QEMU, however you say it, um, virtual machines running inside of it. So it's kind of like a little bit backwards from what you'd think, but we take VMDK or whatever from Cisco or Arista Juniper, and we basically build a container with that image inside of it, and then we can fire up these virtual devices. There's a lot more to it than that. You can actually connect devices to one another with another like kind of intermediary container. Uh, the thing it's you could obviously just spin up VMs and stuff, but you get a lot of kind of benefits from Docker Compose Up and stuff like that with VRNet Lab. So basically, the I broke testing for Scrapli into kind of three major components, and you'll see that in the testing directory. There's a smoke test kind of section, and that's just silly little scripts. They don't actually get executed during testing. But if I'm working on IOSXE driver, I could just run the smoke test for IOSXE, and it goes out and runs commands, sends configs, does some verification, test timeouts, stuff like that. So those are just kind of like nice to have. You're working on some stuff, you can just run a quick thing to test. Then there's unit tests. So obviously, that's just unit testing the code. And then functional tests are all of the actual tests that get executed against the VRNet Lab environment. So obviously, they kind of expect some specific IPs and stuff like that. That the README should kind of walk through how to set all of that up. But basically, there's a make commands or a Docker Compose file, and you can just fire up all the virtual machines representing each of those five core platforms plus a Linux one, and all of the tests will get executed against those devices. So that way, even if you want to contribute to Scrapli, you don't have to have kit from any of those vendors. You don't have to have virtual machines. You can just run it in containers. Obviously, there's some significant resource requirements, especially for the ISXR. But in theory, anybody could do this with enough resources.
Got it. Okay, so it basically spins up QEMU virtual machines in Docker containers, allowing
Exactly.
you to test against more or less the real operating system.
Yep.
I mean,
Exactly.
it is a real operating system. It's just you just
Yep.
run in a weird way, I guess, but you
Yeah.
can
But
still
portable,
connect to
which
it
is
and
nice.
get the full operating system and actually do testing instead of just mocking the whole interaction, right?
Yep. Yeah. Exactly. And now that we've kind of talked to the transports a little bit more, the unit testing is basically the whole point of the transport is to provide a file-like object to channel, so that the channel can read and write into this file. And so, from a unit testing perspective, we basically just mock that file literally with a bytes.io file descriptor. So, at the very least, the unit testing is definitely testing how the channel reads and writes. But obviously, that doesn't account for any kind of real quirks on a device. But we can feed input into the file descriptor, or we could set the prompt and we could do all that kind of thing. So you get a very similar kind of experience to the real thing. So it's a good approximation with like one weird mock, but the goal is to just be able to test as much as possible, obviously.
Got it. Okay, last thing I want to discuss before doing stuff is docs.
Yeah.
And I, let's put it this way: there is very big difference between this page and this page. So tell me about your approach to documentation and like how do you
Yeah.
treat it? Why it's such a big page, dude?
So the actual docs, somewhere in that page, there's an actual link to the API docs. And it looks a lot like netmiko's because when I was working for Kirk, we flipped the docs over to use pdoc3. So that's auto-generated docs from pdoc3. So the docs for Scrapli are also auto-generated with pdoc3, or at least the API docs. Um, that said, obviously the README is a small book. So I've tried to focus on writing out everything every time I'm like, okay, well, I added a feature or a widget or I changed a thing. I try to make sure I'm accurately representing that in the README. So that's why it's grown quite a bit, and I try to be as organized as I can with good table of contexts and links and all that kind of junk. There's also a docs folder in the repo, and that's where the actual PDoc generated API docs go. And also there's like a public API status, which is just like a bunch of markdown tables that show all of the public methods in Scrapli and when the last change was and when it was implemented, and any kind of notes. That way, hopefully people will be able to find that useful. And then there's a change log that I've started trying to keep up to date. So every change I make, I'm putting into the change log as well. Just so that if a version changes and you want to quickly see what happens, you can go ahead and do that. So yeah, I mean, docs have been a big focus for me. That page that you're on, the dark colored page there, that's just the README in GitHub pages. So that's nothing really, I guess, fancy. But I guess it's easy to look at. So
Yeah, I mean, I really like this page because it takes you through the all core features of the library and gives you, I guess, everything you need to actually get started. Because by just looking at this, and is there some other netmiko page in the docs that I'm not looking at, or
Uh, I think we set up the README on netmiko to be kind of the same way the Scrapli is way back when. So the README is probably also on the GitHub pages page, and then the rest is really on the blog. And then I can find
oh yeah, here it is. Yeah, okay, so there is this, right? Which just have just a couple of
It's
things.
just the README. Yeah.
Yeah, and then let me see.
And then the actual API docs for Scrapli look very much the same as netmiko because it's just p.3. That said, my doc strings tend to be a little bit verbose.
Yep,
Clearly, I'm rather verbose with all of the writing, right? So hopefully the
yep.
doc strings, which is what shows up in the p.3 generated docs, all the args. So I religiously rented Google style doc strings. So all of that gets parsed by p.3 and put into the page.
Okay. So let me something broke here. Let me go back to the project, and I had to rename the folder because of the name thing
Yeah.
when I start importing stuff. I learned my mistake that I should never ever do that again. So now it's scrapli apps. Okay.
Hopefully it all works. Seems important.
Okay. So I have that. Okay, so I have everything is empty. Let's get a new terminal here. Okay, so let's create a new well, probably I should start with creating a virtual environment first. Yeah. Okay. And then since I'm heavy poetry user, yeah, we'll probably just leave it like this. And scrapli is 3.6 plus, right?
Yep.
Like nornir is. Okay.
Yep.
Hold on. Python version I have 37. Okay. Let's do poetry and use this again. No. No. Yes. Okay. Now I want to install scrapli, but there's something to keep in mind here, right? Since we're talking about some of these extra pieces. So it uses this how it's called, extras, right? Feature in when you're installing the library. I mean, you can install just scrapli via pip, right? But then you will not get some of these other transport mechanisms. So by default, it uses what, system SSH, right?
Correct. Yep.
So, and since we want to go fast, well, I definitely want to go fast. So
Yeah,
we'll
62
need
is
to
the way to
have,
go.
we'll need SSH too, but also another thing that we will definitely be exploring textfsm, right?
Yep.
So we want to have that as well. So all of these like some of these extra things are actually extras that you have to additionally install. And the way you do it in Python is using this kind of weird square brackets notation. Is there a list of all options somewhere in the docs
Yeah.
page?
Yep. On the advanced installation section, there's only 4. There's paramiko, SSH2, textfsm, genie.
Okay, so paramiko stage to textfsm genie. And you can, I think, mix and match those, right? If you want to.
Yeah. Yeah. Of
Is
course.
there
Yeah.
like all or no? Because I will probably
You
need to
could
install all right now.
not right now, but I guess I could probably add that. That idea.
Okay, and
Scraply fold or
roughly,
something.
is it with comma? Do you remember if it's like
I think
this?
so. Yeah. That should work. Yeah.
Is it by ATS? Oh, it's Genie. Okay.
Genie. Yeah, and the reason I made them all extras was because by itself there's literally 0 dependencies for Scraply. It's 100% standard library. So that's been kind of a big focus.
Jack,
Probably
thank you
doesn't
for
matter.
following Bucket Fire. Thank you so much for gifting the sub.
Nice. But yeah, so by default there's 0 requirements at all. So I wanted to make sure that if you had like a really locked down environment or something weird requirements like that, you can use Scraply without installing anything else. Probably a corner case for most people, but
Yeah, so you can just, in very weird environment, you could just get wheel right for Scraply
yeah.
from by API. Upload it the way you can upload it there, and then just install it without any other extra dependency. That's pretty interesting. Though
Okay.
I know that some
I don't know
people
why you
are in
need to,
this
but
situation, but I don't know how they are working with Python then, or
yeah, I
I
agree.
mean, or any other language, I guess, right? Like if you cannot use anything from PyAPI, that's
Well, you could still use Scraply. That's the only thing you can use, maybe.
right. Is the question from Packet Parent, is Poetry the best tool out there for package management on Python? I mean, it depends on who you ask. If you ask me, then yes. Carl, what do you think about
I
package?
don't like poetry. I'm a happy boy with requirements and setup.py and stuff.
Okay. See, we have two people on the stream and two different opinions. So,
To be
what
fair,
do,
I haven't really done like a lot with it, so probably
okay.
just ignorance. But
Is there something specific that you don't like about poetry?
it just seems like heavy-handed
Hmm.
and slow. like requirements TXT is very light and easy, and I guess I haven't had really any occasion where I need to pin something like where some of the benefits of poetry would really be useful, at
Got
least
it.
for me. But
Okay, that's fair. Okay, so here I will be adding also bpython and ptb++. bpython, since we'll be exploring in the interpreter first, so I want to have a little bit better interpreter. What else do I need? Maybe nothing, I guess. I will need Flake 8 so VS Code actually works with it, because it's kind of weird, like until you install Flake 8, it doesn't highlight some of the issues that you have. And let's also have black. So I will have that, and what else do I need? I will also probably need to install netmiko as well, just for comparison, so people can see like side by side, like how how API is different. Yeah, so let's write for that, and I can also start like a script, have it sandbox py. Okay, let's probably I will not even have right now the proper things. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to write code here, and I'm going to copy paste it into the interpreter, and then we kind of will be exploring the object on the fly. Okay, so this is installed, and now I have to install also netmiko as well. Okay, and I will have to update the project here, so my VS Code has all of the IDE features, because I really don't want to code without IDE support. So
might as well get all that type checking. Get your
yeah,
money's
type
worth for
checking
it.
and also auto completion, because until you actually do that, it will not even do auto completion for you. It's kind of sucks. It's definitely sucks if you don't know. And if I could also type in actually proper language, not okay. So okay, so this one I have to change. So it's what in env bin placate. And I think Python pass and bin Python. Oops, and in Python. Okay, so I think this should work. Okay, so we will refer to the docs. Those here. No, no. Okay, here. Yep. So from scrapli driver for import Cisco SXC. We'll start with XC, so this is a platform I'm mostly familiar with. And we have our connection details here. Okay, so it's host. And so this one is 153, 181. Okay, and auth username, auth password. Go ahead and do that. Username. By the way, is there a way to give this platform to like some generic class so it selects the class for you?
Not right now. That's something that I've got a personal Trello board of stuff to do, and I've been thinking about adding that.
How do you do it right now? So you also have a plugin for Nornir, right? Right now. How do you do that in Nornir then? Because in Nornir you have platform as a string, right? How do you select class?
Yeah, there's just a mapping dictionary that maps.
Okay. So you have
Nothing
like
fancy.
you have a
Yeah.
dictionary which says, okay, if it's this string, then it's this class, right? Okay.
Yep, exactly. Yeah, not fancy at all, but it works.
Okay, so since we don't have a platform, right, as a string, so I will just use this. Wait.
Yeah, it's iOS XE driver.
So I guess I want this, right? Interesting.
It's
Why?
iOS XE. Yep, there you go.
Okay, so I have that, and then I just do connection by
So one
driver.
other important point here is that by default, Scrapli is going to enforce SSH strict key checking. So I don't know for your lab, but my lab's always all screwed up. So I pretty much always put auth underscore strict key false in the device dictionary there.
Okay, does it matter which transport you use, or it will
No,
look for
I
the...
implemented checking everywhere. Yeah. Well,
Okay,
obviously not for telnet, but
okay. So I need that, and well, and I just need open.
yeah.
And then
Yeah, or you
if I
could use a
have that
context
on the
manager.
interpreter, I should be able to play with the connection object.
Yep.
So let's go
Yep.
ahead and try this here. Which on the Python. Okay, let's go ahead and try. And by default, the transport is SSH, sorry, system SSH, right? And I think
Yep.
I complained to you about this, right? That we'll see. Maybe on i6 it will actually work fine. I don't remember. But it
Oh,
depends, like if you
the
can
transport
actually,
options. Yeah.
yeah, if you can
Yeah.
actually connect by SSH to your platform by SSH binary. Okay, so this one is stuck for me. I guess it's going to end up giving me a trace back.
Yeah, I cranked the timers up for like the default timer, so it takes a minute. But I'm pretty sure the current PyPI branch has the fix that we talked about.
What is the default
Okay.
timeout for the connection?
Good question. It's pretty slow, like 30 seconds, I think.
Okay, so I guess I would want to check if I can connect to my device via the binary, via the OpenSSH client. Okay, I can connect by SSH binary, so that's actually kind of weird. I thought if this works.
Yeah, if that works, it should be good in theory. Yeah, we can turn on logging or try paramiko or whatever too. But that looks reasonable to me. It seems very it should have timed out by now. I think the ops timeout's 30 seconds.
Just for test, you know what I'm going to do? I'll do this, and I will save this file, and I will run it from here. Just the Python sandbox provide. Do you need to disable failed to open connection? And it's actually instantly exception style platform. It's also weird that it doesn't crash here.
Yeah.
Count connection. Do you need to disable auth strict key?
Yeah, basically
Yes.
right now that's the default message. If there's any exception that isn't already handled, so like if it's not host key verification or ops timeout or connection timeout or route to host or no cipher, I would imagine there might be some case sensitivity things in there. I didn't call .low or anything. So in the
Okay.
UF handler.
Is
So
there
yeah,
is there some easy way to troubleshoot this really fast, or I should just switch to transport?
yeah. We just turn on logging quickly would be what I would do, and then we should be able to actually see.
Just basic Python logging will be enough. So if you do basic
Yeah.
config, okay.
Yep, exactly. And then
So
just get
logging,
logger scrapli.
and then is it level? Level.
Yeah.
And debug. No matching key exchange found. Yeah, so this was
Yeah.
the same thing we
Before.
discussed. Okay,
Yeah.
so let me try finding. If Slack deleted our conversation on that or not, I don't remember. Do you remember how to easily do this?
Yeah. Well, so you could do one of two things. So just to kind of recap, because Scrapli is just using whatever in SSH, if there's any issue where there's like a key exchange or a missing cipher or anything weird like that, Scrapli is going to have an issue, basically. So what we can do, I would assume, since when you SSH manually, it works. I would assume that you sorted this out in your config file. So we can just say SSH underscore config underscore file true in Scrapli in the device that you pass to the connection. And that'll go ahead and find your system default location SSH config file. So that would be usually etc ssh underscore config or your user directory .ssh config. So Scrapli will automatically look for that. Alternatively, you could pass a path to the file there. Of course, if you want, we should need to do that.
Right. So we have a problem with key exchange, right? But because I have when we were troubleshooting this before, right? I added this one to my config file, and now it works, but Scrapli doesn't know that it should use this config file yet.
Right. Yeah, it doesn't use the config file by default, so we just have to tell it.
Well, let me see. I should be able to find it here.
Yeah, it's just SSH underscore config.
And is it just true or false, or you should provide both?
True, false, or a string. Yep, true, false. True would be fine here, assuming it's in your normal SSH config.
Okay, so and we are on our breakpoint, which is pretty nice. So I should be able to have my connection. So let's see what I have. I probably want to. Okay. Bunch of stuff. Okay, so args, prompt, connection function. Okay, whatever. So what is available on this connection? Let's do some platform specific stuff, I guess, right? Let's just do what send command did, like hello world in world of network automation, I guess. So let's say I want
show version.
Show version, yes. Show version response, I guess. Let's put it like this. And this will be connection send command.
Yeah.
And you have a bunch of different options here. You have send command, send commands, and send commands from file. So do you mind briefly talking about those?
Yep. Yeah. So thanks to Dimitri, one of the reasons for this, basically Scrapli returns a response object. So if you're familiar with requests or anything like that, or nornir really, Scrapli always returns a response, which is just an object. We wanted to make sure that the API was really explicit and clear. So send command expects a single string, one command to send, and it returns a single response object, one object. Right? Send commands obviously is multiple plural, so we can have a list of commands, and what gets returned is a basically a list of responses. It's this subclass user list, but that doesn't really matter. But it's a list of responses. So then send commands from file. Obviously, you pass it a file name instead of a list of commands, and it'll basically send all of the commands in your file, one command per line, and return a list of the results or responses.
Mm-hmm.
So just trying to be explicit with the API, like
Right.
what you send and what you get back.
Right. This was one of my problems with netmiko, for example, right? Specifically when we add stuff like textfsm, right? Where in netmiko you can get either raw output, right, as a string. You may have list of outputs, and you may also have a list of parsed outputs, like list of dictionaries, and like you can, if you use type checking, that is horrible. Like you because you will need to type check this as a union of stuff. Like you don't know what you don't know what type you will end up with, right? So it's kind of like all of the stuff below that, it's you cannot type check this anymore unless you are like explicitly casted with something. So by having explicit
His
API,
instance.
for stuff, like you know exactly what you get. And in this case, like you get either, so if you do this, you get response, right? Or if you do send commands, you get list of responses. And on that, those objects, since those are objects, right, you have, and they are type checked, so you will have auto completion for like, okay, this response has a result and then elapsed time and stuff like that, right? Is this syntax right now correct that I have on the screen? I don't remember. I think it's fine, right?
Yep,
Just command.
looks good.
And all of this can be found on this README page.
Yeah, and there's an examples directory as well.
Oh, it's also show version. Wow. Okay.
It's a surprise, right?
Okay. Surprise, surprise. Okay. So now I get this as a response object. And this response has a bunch of stuff. Let's explore that. Oh, Control E doesn't work in VS Code. Okay,
What?
so I have elapsed time. I have if it's failed or not. But probably the most important is the result, right? This is just a raw string. So if I do print show version response result, right? So this is just an output from the device. But since this is an object, you have a bunch of other stuff like elapsed time. This is how, is it in seconds or?
Yeah, it should be.
Okay. Finish time. What about this fail? Tell me about this fail. How does it know if it's failed or not?
Good question. So the network drivers, the core drivers right now, have and in develop branch but not pushed to production. This is configurable, but in current version that you have, I think installed, it should be set, but just not user configurable at this point. But in the iOS driver, for example, there is a failed when contains list, which is just a list of strings that are all the strings that you would expect iOS XE to complain about. So if you sent, blah, 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 that's obviously not a command. iOS XE is going to print something that's something along the lines of like %time or %sign, unknown command, ambiguous command, whatever. So the core drivers have a list of those. And again, in the next release tomorrow or whenever, that'll be user configurable on object instantiation. But basically, the response, when you run send command, it'll say if any of these strings that are in this failed when contains are in the output, then this command is failed and it'll mark it as failed. The failed is just a bool, obviously, that's just true or false, failed or not.
Okay, so it doesn't stop you from doing anything else, right? And
right.
I hope it doesn't.
there is a option in send commands and send commands from file and also send configs. That's it's called stop on failed, and so you can stop execution if you see one that's failed and just phrase out exit midway through, if you had a list of 10 commands and the sixth one failed, you just wouldn't send the last handful. But that's not by default. It's just it's an option if you want.
Were you ever thinking, and I'm not suggesting you should do that, but since you have this kind of like failed stuff, and let's say you have send configs, right? And you failed on some command, were you ever thinking about reverting all of the stuff that you did before that?
So for IOSXE, IOSXR and Junos, you can have there's another widget, I forget what it is already, but you can abort the config session. So obviously, because you have like the commit mechanism in IOSXR or Junos, you effectively do that. With config sessions for NXOS and EOS, that's probably doable. I don't think I would probably put that in scrapli core for IOSXE because then I'd have to add in archive stuff. And I would think that would kind of be a separate library.
Yeah.
But
it's really complex, but it also could be interesting, but it's complex.
yeah,
It's like
yeah, definitely.
it's magic with privilege levels taking up to 100 or so.
Yeah, that was a whole weekend gone down the drain. Staring at how to do this.
So I
The other thing,
installed.
since we're,
Sorry, go ahead.
as I said, the other thing, since we're talking about the status and the failed stuff, there's also an attribute of the response or the multi-response, raise on failed or raise for status. And this is exactly like the requests thing. So you could get a response object back from requests. And yeah, exactly. You can call raise for status. And if that response or any of the responses in the multi-response was failed, it'll raise an exception for you. So you can handle it like that.
Okay.
And that's pretty much exactly the way request works. So it's kind of just copied from that. Copied the idea.
Okay, let's okay, let's do connection send command. And I still have logging by the okay, so in this logging I have on the channel what is going on, right? I see this, and I guess this should say that now this is not successful, right? And if I raise for status, this will give me an exception, correct?
Yeah, it should be a scrapli command failure.
Scrapli command failure.
And all the scrapli exceptions, there's a scrapli base exception, so everything inherits from that. So if you wanted to try to catch any scrapli exception, you can just catch the base one.
Okay. Is this raised only when you have one of these things, or
Yep.
okay? The reason I kind of ask about this is that so in some of my code I have retry mechanisms, right? And those retry mechanisms, I have like a special decorator which analyzes the exception object. If it's either as a class or something, or there is some kind of check condition on that exception class. For example, let's say if you do HTTP request and it fails, you get a response object. You don't necessarily need to do raise for status if you don't want to, right? You can just check if it's HTTP client or server error. And if it's HTTP client error, there is no reason to ever try this because it's just a problem with your payload or whatever it is, right? But if it's server error, then I will retry it. So that's the reason why I ask about this command failure, because this pretty much means it's a user error, right? Or some kind of like, I mean, it's still user error if it's like sequence of command is wrong or something, right? Because device return to use this.
Yeah, if you get it all the way back, it's basically a user error, right? The other alternative would be scrapli explodes during execution, then it would raise some other timeout error or something like that, I think. So I think, yeah, it's safe to say that that would be client side.
Okay, cool. So we have that, and okay, So since we are on topic of show version and we also installed Genie and textfsm, I think that would be a good point of checking that. And let's go to documentation for that. Here. And unlike netmiko, I don't think you need environmental variable, right? You just have to install NTC templates.
Yeah, it just has to be pip installed.
Yeah, okay. So
you can manually pass a template if you want. Obviously, there's mechanisms for all of that, but by default, it'll just use pip installed stuff.
So here is an example. So we have this response object, and this response object you can get textfsm parse output. So let's go ahead and do that. And we had show version response text fsm, and you can see that there is auto completion for this. So, and now I have this thing parsed with textfsm, right? But I can also parse it. So here's example if you want to have your template manual, I guess, right?
Yep.
Something is not covered by NTC templates, you can provide your own, but there is also Genie.
And if either of those fail, textfsm or Genie, it's going to return an empty list or dictionary. I can't remember which one, but that way you're always getting a object or a data structure back instead of just getting a string, because you already have the string in the result attribute of that response object. So there's no reason to return the string. It would just be confusing.
Okay. Yeah. Show version Genie, right? Genie parse auto. And this is one of the reasons why there was a suggestion of having these response objects, right? Because in netmiko you have use textfsm true or use pyts or something, or use Genie true, right? And then it changes your output behavior. That's from type checking perspective, it's a nightmare. Okay, so I do this, and now I have the same thing parsed with Genie pretty much. Okay, cool. So, folks, for those of you who don't know, and there is a lot of material out there on PyTS Genie as well, but this is like a framework which is developed internally by Cisco. PyTS is mostly focused on testing, and there is this big piece of it called Genie, which is responsible for parsing stuff. And there are a bunch of these parsers for Cisco. It's like a lot of parsers. There are also already built-in parsers for some other platforms. I think like the latest was a 5 or something that they added.
Juniper. Weirdly.
Yeah, and I think Juniper as well. But at least first, if you work with especially Cisco stuff, like the amount of stuff that can be parsed with Genie is just insane. Okay, so you have either these two choices for parse, well, and this is probably what you really want to do, right? Because honestly, unless you do configuration, like if you do any kind of show commands, returning them as a raw output doesn't make a lot of sense. You want them to be parsed in one form or another, and ideally you don't want to write your regular expressions. I mean, you obviously can, but you will hate yourself and you'll hate programming languages as well. So use the tools that someone already built for you here. Obviously, it will not work for you 100% of the cases. Like every so often, you will stumble upon something that is not available in Genie, not available, or maybe not available in NTC templates. So you will probably have to do something, but you can take some of their examples in both Genie or NTC templates and just, fix it and provide it to scrapli to handle it. But probably I wouldn't advise you to start from scratch and writing all of your regular expressions, especially if you want parse more than one thing from an output. Okay, so now let's try configuring stuff. Right, so do I have any banner? Show banner. MRPG. I don't have banner, so let's do something super simple like banner. Okay, this here, and it's send config. Okay, so send config. This is something only available in your platforms
network
which are
drivers.
supported, right?
Yep.
Where you have that driver, right? Because that does, if you need to do config, you need to be on the proper privilege level or whatever that thing is called, right? On the proper level. Like, I don't remember any platform where you can just type config directly in the like usual prompt, right? You need to do something. You need to do conft enable on ISXC. You need to do some. You need to go to some kind of configuration piece of the CLI, I guess. So this is like automatic handling of that is implemented by these platform drivers. In this case,
So in this
okay,
case, too, this is a bit of a divergence. There's just a send configs method. Yeah, I've wrestled with kind of like adding a send config singular, but it accepts a list or a list of strings at this point. So this may be a bit of a anti-pattern in Scrapli at the moment, but
okay. So you have send configs, and you can give either list or string, right? Doesn't matter
yep.
which. Okay.
Yep.
So let's do. Okay. I really like this logging logging thing. By the way, is your channel read and channel write are part or in different loggers or no?
There's there's the Scrapli base logger, and then there's channel and transport logs. Most of things are happening in channel, though. I think it's been
Do
a
you
while since
separate read and write? So like you can suppress, let's say.
no, at this point, no.
Okay.
However, if you turn it to just info, you'll get what's read without getting every single like character that gets read.
Oh,
Uh,
so probably I should have info. Okay.
yeah,
Will it?
I mean, debug is
I
obviously
don't
good for
think it
debugging.
works right now, but because Python logging is weird. Like sometimes when you already configure it, you will not be able to reconfigure it unless you do the programmatic way. But let me try. I don't think this works, but I could be wrong.
Real quick.
I'm an idiot.
Oh, yeah. I was like, wait, what's going on? I get it.
That's yeah. I will probably.
Good enough time to restart the session there.
Okay. So let's
Yeah, so
do response connection send. Well, I guess that worked already, but or TV. I'll change it right now. Okay. So it goes to config prompt and it stays there, right? As you said.
yep.
So if I do send command right now, will it work?
Yep.
Yeah, it should, right?
Yep. Send, because basically all of the methods try to acquire the appropriate privilege ahead of time.
Okay. So this succeeded. Lapse time. Oh, this returns a list of things, right?
Yeah.
And is it like one per line or how does that work?
Oh, yeah, one per. Yeah, basically
Is it one per line or one per provided strings as the input?
one per provided input.
Okay.
Yeah.
So this should work. Okay. I don't think I need to see anything else here. I just need to see it on the device, right? I mean, or is there something useful that you
Or you
can
could
get?
Probably no, but you could do a send command to get the banner, and then that way it will show that it gets out of config mode. You know.
No, I won't do it like this. Excuse me. Okay, so we have this banner here. Cool. So this configuration works. It really takes. I'm surprised the transport the system one is quite fast. I don't
It's
think it
quick.
works
I mean,
as fast in a bunch of threads.
yeah. So I was thinking about that the last time we talked about it, and I gotta think that we're still just like fighting Python. But if we do SSH2, it's got to be so much less CPU too. So even if it's not like even if SSH2 is just only a little bit faster, the benefit from a CPU perspective has got to be useful. I don't know. That's speculation. I just know like I read David's CPU threads versus coroutines blog post recently and was thinking about that.
By the way, folks, if you have not seen it, you should probably read it.
Yeah, it's an interesting one.
I need to find it. No. I'm not sure if it's this. It maybe on the Nornir tech.
Yeah, it's on tech. Yeah, I think.
Yeah, this one.
Yeah.
How many threads are enough threads? So yeah, if you please link the blog in the tweet. I retweeted it, so
Already done.
done. So yeah, if you haven't read this, it's still kind of it depends pretty much the answer to this question. So
yeah.
But yeah, Python is kind of weird with like it has lower limit of concurrent tasks than something like Go, for example. With async IO you can raise that, but yeah, whatever. We are on the tangent here. This is an interesting article to check it out.
Yeah.
Okay, so
I'd be interested to see that done like against your lab with like actual IO instead of just sleep. Because I feel like that's probably gonna skew it pretty.
I want to do that as well. I actually wanted to prepare it for today, but I kind of failed. So what I did last time, I deleted my GNet 3 VM, so I have to rebuild some pieces of it. At least I have a code which generates 500 devices, but there is some other like there are like 20 switches around. So those I was placing manually, like I didn't want to automate that. So I have to rebuild all of that. And I was like, no, I don't have time for this right now. But yeah, I'm very curious about like checking scrapli, netmiko, and Go in that setup, specifically difference between those three. And also different transports. It could be very, very interesting data. Okay, so what I will do here is, so folks, we pretty much like covered the basis of the library. I don't think there is like you send configs or you send commands, and there is another driver which I don't really want to kind of go through that, because then I'll have to like do this terminal bit stuff, and I don't want to deal with that. But if your platform is not supported, you can take a look at that, right? Should they import what, scrape class or something else?
Generic drivers probably.
Generic driver.
Probably most people shouldn't use scrape really.
Using generic driver. There is wait, is there a send command there?
Yeah, generic driver has the command and commands, but no concept of config.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Do you think this should work right now on my 60 device? Like,
yeah, that should work.
You know
That's
what?
my
Then
then
let's try this.
VM IP. So it's been.
So by default, you have some kind of regex for like catch all, right? For prompts or something. So it already finds a bunch of prompts,
kind of
correct?
Very broad. Yep, exactly. So generic driver, assuming you as the user manually handle the privilege escalation stuff, disabling paging, the generic driver prompt should work on any of the core platforms. And there's also there's a non-core device example in the examples repository or folder in the repository that shows using this against a wireless LAN controller, which is a little quirky
Mm-hmm.
in that it prompts you for username and password, even though you've used SSH to auth. So that shows
Yeah.
also not only using generic driver, but having a custom on open method or function.
Mm-hmm. Which handles those username passwords, right?
Yep. Yep,
Mm-hmm.
exactly.
Okay. So I think this should be fine, right?
Yeah, that sure looks like it.
You can use Python -i scripty instead of breakpoint. If you don't really need PGP, it will be faster. Yeah, thank you for a suggestion. Let me try that. Okay, so I will save this, and the suggestion was, I'm curious if this works with bpython as well. bpython -i. I hope this does. Response. No, it doesn't work with Python. Okay, then I will just keep the breakpoint. I have a little bit better debugger. It's called PTB++. It completely replaces PTB. So I will keep that. Because in Python, if you go to, I actually don't remember. Hold on, let me try that. Do you get auto-completion when you do Python -i? And I have to say this. Oh, yeah. Closing parentheses would be very helpful.
You can opt to open it here, I think. Yeah, you gotta open it, open the connection.
Oh no. It's so if you do this on this, right? If you do context manager, this will do open for you automatically. Otherwise, you have to do it explicitly.
Yep. Yeah, and I've got a thing in the develop branch right now that I'm not sure if I love that catches that attribute error and raises like a more clear exception. But I don't know if I love it. So I don't know if it's gonna make it into master. But
I would
I've
probably
been thinking
have
about
like
handling it.
different exception for that.
Yeah.
Okay, so I have response result. The same thing. I can do a genie parse output on it, right? Oh wow.
There's no
Oh,
there's no platform set for generic driver. So
right. Yeah. Okay.
you should be able to. I don't think generic driver has that actually.
Probably like if you see how NTC templates work, maybe like if you can get the template from that library, right, and pass it through the textfsm, you probably can do it. But yeah, so this is like something to keep in mind when you deal with something generic, right? Since we don't know the platform, we don't know like what parsing mechanism you should use for that, so you will need to explicitly provide that. But at least like if you can deal with raw commands if you want to. And we have response elements too. Okay. And if I want to do configuration, will I need to do conft config and an and, right?
Yep, exactly.
Okay. Cool. I don't think I want to do that right now. I think we are good
Yeah.
there. What I'm
Most
going
people
to
just
do though is I will keep this, and let's have a very generic example where we gather a bunch of commands and then we do some configuration piece. and we will measure time for that, and we will rebuild the same script with netmiko for one device. I think it makes sense because kind of like we covered majority of the functionality here for the library. Okay, so let's do our commands list. So we'll have show version because it's the best command ever. Show run, show IP interface brief. Let's do show ARP and show platform resources. Okay, so I have these 4 commands, and then let's do config, and then let's again do banner. Do you have something else in mind which kind of like doesn't affect anything at all?
I was just build loopbacks, put silly descriptions on them.
Loopbacks, let me see. Yeah, I think we can do it. Banner, LTG, configured using scrapli. And \n interface loopback 100 /n description.
That's probably gonna break, I think.
\n is going to break, but it's just the same as you read the file, no?
No, because we split it into a list of commands, and basically every command that gets entered, we read from the channel until that command gets entered. So if you enter the new line, then there's going to be, the banner will get configured or whatever, and then I think it'll break Scrapli from reading from the next line.
Ouch. Okay.
I don't know. We could try.
Yeah,
I would just send a list of configs, but yeah, we could definitely try it.
So we'll have what 4 commands? No, actually, I don't need that since I have very magic method send commands, right?
Yeah.
Send commands, and I just provide commands. Okay, and then we just have response. I don't really need that response, but whatever. Response. I will actually print it on the screen, right? Response failed, right? Connection send configs. CHG. I think something like this, right?
Yeah.
Okay.
Now I'm curious if it's going to work. I think the config thing is going to fail. Wait, we'll see.
Yeah, it's stuck infinitely.
Yeah, because it's going to it's going to basically break the channel. So if you broke it into a list, it would be fine. But
So what you're saying is that if I have like Ginger template or something, right? I'll have to do split lines on that.
Or just point to the file.
Like configs from
if
file.
Yeah.
But if I use Ginger template, like I don't have file for that, right?
Yeah, that's a good.
I built a string, right? So this would be, so it would be CFG split lines, I guess, right?
Yeah.
But I also wait.
This is
when you do
this is
split
making me
lines,
want to add
you
a
still
send
get
config.
\n, right? If you do split lines. So I'll
No,
have to also strip them.
No, I think it kills the new line.
Does it kill them? Let's try. Oh yeah, it kills. Okay. So I just need split lines here. Okay, so this is something to keep in mind.
Yeah.
Can you configure another loopback? I should be able to, but I mean for there is questions chat. Can you configure another loopback? We can. It's just probably for our test doesn't really matter what we configure. What I want to do is to have some command gathering and some configuration, and we'll do exactly the same config with netmiko, and we'll test how different that is. Okay, so I have Python sandbox py, and probably I should disable logging because the logging on the console, actually it's stuck as well, dude. I'm not sure why.
Yeah, that's interesting.
Panorama OTT configured using scrapli. Oh yeah, I am an idiot. Hold on. There wasn't $sign, so okay, so yeah, if I don't split lines, it's definitely gets stuck. So split lines.
Yeah, and then response, you'd have to call raise for status, or yeah, we'll just do list count.
Okay, so nothing failed and everything was configured. So we should see this loopback right now, right? And we should be able to see banner, which we can. Okay, so we have multiple commands here. Cool. So let me disable this logging so we kind of like measure time better. And do you think we should do something with these results? I don't want to print them because print will like screw up timing.
You just print response.failed, I guess, or just do raise for status. At least that way you know it worked.
Yeah. So this would be the same thing, right? Image show. Okay. So now we can measure time of this. We can also check so we do time. So this takes 1.5 seconds. Let's change the transport. So remind me how to do it correctly. Oh well, I should probably.
It's just transport and then SSH2.
And then SSH config file doesn't matter, correct? If I do SSH2.
Yeah, it won't matter for now.
Okay. So we do the same thing. Wow, it's actually the same time. So it's actually very curious that the time difference is only seen when you're using threads for this.
I think that's why I was thinking it's like maybe CPU related, because if you look at like the first one, you had 20% CPU versus it's only 5% difference, but
okay, so it's pretty much comparable, all of these three transport, if you use for like a single device in a single thread. But okay, we will copy this file, right? And then we will do the same thing for netmiko. So netmiko, if only I remember it. You need like, I need an example. Okay, and then it has username, it has password, and I need device type as well. Time step. And this will be
Cisco underscore XC.
I don't, is there XC?
Yeah, there's.
Okay.
I also work just fine too. They both map to the same class anyway.
Okay, so, and then this, do you have to open connection?
Nope.
It will does it for you here, right?
Yep.
Okay, so okay, and here we'll have just send commands, right? No, it's send command, I think. Yeah, it's send command. Fine for send command, right? It's send command. Yeah. Oh,
But there's no plural, so you have to
you
do
can
that.
you need to do this for command in commands. And then we don't have this, and send config set, and then I think just this works on netmiko, and here you'll be doing this loopback 200, and here is netmiko, obviously. Okay, and this is I will not be printing anything here. Okay, so maybe I did it correctly, but let's see.
Find out. Looks right.
What is this?
Oh, it's did you do iOS? Sorry, it's just XE, not iOS XE for the device type.
Hmm. Well, I guess something broke.
It's just device. I think it's just the device type.
Do you have to do any sort of disconnect? Yeah, I mean, yeah, and pretty much I always do this, and probably I should actually do it correctly.
Hmm.
And I will do the same thing. I always do this. The only reason why I didn't start this was because we were exploring it in the interpreter, and in the interpreter you cannot do this. I mean, you can, but you lose your connection when you get to the prompt in the interpreter. So you like technically cannot work with it the way you want it to work. So, and you're saying you don't need open here, right? If I do this.
Correct. Yep.
Okay.
Or that line 25.
Yeah. I'm not running this script though right now, so something is broken here.
It's what is that? Yeah, that seems right.
Socket timeout. No, I have device type. Is it device underscore device minus? I think it's underscore.
It's underscore. I thought it was XE. Maybe it's iOS.
Let's do iOS.
Oh, yeah, iOS definitely is for sure.
I'm confused why it's broken. Maybe it has some. I mean, it probably shouldn't, because I actually use configs with backslash n with netmiko in some of my production stuff, and I think it should work. Do you see the problem? Because I have no clue.
Yeah,
Yeah, it's actually failing on the config. Let me just do split lines for to be safe.
yeah. If you the command verify is new and maybe default in netmiko. So if you're on like 3.1, I think that it's breaking for the same reason scrapli breaks basically.
Okay, this works. Yeah. So this took 13 seconds. And let's go to device and check it, right? So netmiko and then show IP interface brief. I should have pullback 200. with the description, right? So I have it. So this took 13 seconds, and let's run again our scrapli. So this took 1.5 seconds. So like it's already what, like 9 times difference? 9? Almost 10, right? And this is not even with threads. CFG should be list, yeah, okay. Cool. So we have this. I think this would be a good point to check on my lab with 10 devices, right? And also to see this difference. And then we will be able to like wrap it up and discuss some of the extra stuff that you are working on. Okay, so what do I need? I need a lab. I don't want to use this lab because it has different platforms. So like we have to deal with them somehow. So I just don't want to do it right now. But there are like XR and Nexus and iOS XE, so technically I could test how it works on different devices. But I mean, the API is kind of the same, so it doesn't makes a lot of difference. Okay, so let this lab is down. So I have my beautiful 10 CSR lab, which I can just start. Okay, and while it's starting, we have to modify our scripts. So let's do 10 CSR scrapli. Okay, and yeah, let me think. Yeah, okay. So I guess I would just do it lame way, and I would just define all of them like as a separate dictionaries. Yeah, even though it's stupid,
It works.
like I can't be bothered to change it. Okay, so we'll have, I think this could be a dictionary here, kind of like this. You know what? Let's just move this at least here. Okay. Three, four, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. Honestly, dude, I feel that I'm committing a crime right now.
I think we'll all forgive you for it. It works.
I guess for the sake of the, I should go all bad and just do a for loop instead of threads. And just don't test any, like it will not test anything if I do it like if I do it with for loop. Or maybe just a little bit faster. Yeah, I agree with you. Not absolutely not noticeable difference. Okay, so I need to delete it from here. And I guess we'll do the same thing, like the same thing on all devices, kind of thing. Okay, so I need to do. So by the way, when I was working on changing threading in Nornir, let me show you this. I don't know if you have ever seen this, but apparently if you have too many threads with thread pool executor map, it behaves weird. Let me try finding this. I think it is in the core task. I think it's could be task. And thread pool executor. Apparently it's not in the task.
Is it core?
It is in core, but could be
Okay.
here in the UI. Yeah. So we have this thread pool executor, and I was testing this by the way on my lab with 500 devices. When I was changing this, let me find it. Where is this? Is pool executor here. So I had, instead of, there is pool.map that you can use, and you provide like a list of variables that are changing, the input parameters that are changing, and your function. So when I was using this on a big network on 500 devices with a lot of threads, apparently some of these tasks like don't finish or something. So that was super weird. So since then, I'm just using this submit thing with futures. So we will repeat the same thing here. I don't know. I'm pretty sure I was doing it correctly, but so from concurrent futures, no, I think it's just from here. Thread pool executor. Okay, and we have to move this into a function. So let me think how to do it. Yes. Yeah. So we need a function which will we'll just call it worker, and it takes connection data, and that's pretty much the only thing it takes. And this is moved there. Visa succeed driver connection data. And I cannot do print really. I mean, I should probably like send it to a file or something. Like since I'm doing this, like I don't know how it can be worse. So probably leave it like this. So let me think. So we send commands and then we send config, right? No, just change it here for test purposes. So I have this, and then I will create a pool. And then for data in right, instance import devices. For connection data in devices values. We will do features append pull map, no, pull submit, and I think function and then arguments. So it's worker and then just connection data, I guess like this. And then we have to do for future in futures. Future result, and I will discard it. Future So this verifies that it finishes that it finished all that it finished all tasks, because if you don't iterate over results, you may end up in scenario where those are not finished. Okay, so I think this is fine. Maybe let's do this. Okay, and here we'll do like something like this, I guess. Device is equal to device name, and then here I can provide device name for devices items, and I can provide the device name like this, and I think this should be fine. Okay, so let's run this. Probably I made some mistake, but doesn't matter very much, which I obviously did. Because this is should obviously be a dictionary. And let's run this again. Any is not defined. Yes. Why my language is being switched all the time? Later PGB plus plus for the win. Yeah, I agree. Do you also use PGB plus plus or not? Yeah, devices should be dict and not list. See, our viewers are paying more attention than I am. Thank you. Sorry, I didn't notice it earlier. Going to drop to continue with my own work, but had a great time watching. Thanks for the tip on PGB++. This will make my life much easier in the future. Well, thank you for tuning in, Pocket Parrot, and thank you for the subs. All right, so actually this worked out, and it took 2.3 seconds on 10 devices.
It's kind of quick.
Yeah. So, here we go. So we have these, right? And if I do show up interface brief, and I have the loopback, and I have this loopback here. Cool. So 2.3 seconds. Now we have to change our script to work with netmiko. So I think I will copy this and netmiko. Cool. So I have netmiko, and I need to merge these two scripts pretty much. Okay, from netmiko import connection handler. And this is getting replaced. And this is connection data. And then the same thing with config device is equal to device name. Okay, so let me do this one more time. So worker is a function which takes device name connection data. We open connection, we send command, and for configuration, I obviously want to change this as well, and this as well, and this was 200. So configured using netmiko on the device, which you pass here. Device is equal to device name. Cool. The same thing with features. Pretty much the same thing. Okay, so let's run this. Yes. Okay, don't judge me.
Copy paste, find replace.
Don't judge me. Okay, this is probably the worst code I have written during the last year or so, but hey.
If only there was like a library that supported a simple inventory and threading for us, right?
Mm, hmm.
I think it might be called Ansible. I don't
Dude, is there no? Is Ansible? Do they have their own? They have their own connection library, right? I think.
It's paramiko,
Yeah, but
but
they
yeah,
are not using
you'll learn.
netmiko, so like they build on top of netmiko directly. Oh no. Well, I think I could. Hmm. Okay.
Beautiful.
Yeah. Best of the best. Okay, I think this is fine. We're done. So our benchmark was what? 2.3 seconds. And did I change transport by the way?
I think it was SSH2 still, I thought.
Did
Yeah.
I? Yeah, it's just H2. Okay, so
Yeah, I'll be curious to see how system hangs in
okay.
there too.
So now it took 13 seconds. It's kind of comparable on like with our previous test, more or less. We had 1 point something, right? And then 12-ish seconds, I think. So it's kind of comparable to that. It starts getting really bad when you add threads, like when you add like around 100 threads, 150 threads. Unfortunately, in this lab that I am right now, we cannot test this fast, but you can test on your own in your big network. If you have like a bunch of devices and you are using 100 plus threads, you'll start seeing some very weird stuff with netmiko. You can use async IO for this stuff. Yeah, you can. You definitely can. Okay, so however, there is one problem with async IO. There are no bindings for async IO bindings for SSH2. So that's a big problem. So there is async SSH like library which provides you this SSH connection, but it doesn't use libSSH2. So that's actually kind of a big deal, and I don't think anyone is working on those bindings. Because you're doing parameters. Yeah, I agree with you 100%. You can use netdev library if you want async IO. We have been discussing with Carl if we can add async IO to this library, but I haven't done any work. I just keep talking instead of actually doing the work. But probably at some point I will have to take a look at that because I actually have a project where I need that, where I need async IO support. It's just not time pressing at the moment, so that's why I kind of have been putting that off. So yeah, async IO is definitely a good option. It's suitable for like IO, especially for this network interaction. But there are problems. Like, first of all, not a bunch of people understand it, especially in network automation community. I like the amount of people who can write even basic async IO programs is very low. Second piece is around the library ecosystem. So there is netdev library, which also like doesn't support a lot of platforms. I like that library, don't get me wrong, but it also doesn't support a lot of platforms, and it has API. I think it has the same exact API as netmiko, so it doesn't have this response object and stuff. It doesn't use any timing, so that part is kind of like it's more efficient. It doesn't use timing like netmiko, so that part is good, but it still has that API where you get raw text output back. And it doesn't use libSSH2 mainly because there are no bindings for libSSH2 with async IO. This is a huge deal. No one is working on it. So yeah, I don't know. Don't know if this is going to change. But yeah, definitely people should take a look at async IO for stuff. Let me parset. Let me see if I can. Carl, just give me a second here. So my bot likes to ban people for links. Okay, so you can pause the link now. Sorry for that. Isn't this stable enough though? Oh, so the links that you provided is async SSH library. So async SSH library is paramiko-ish. So like, can you use that? Definitely. You have to write all of the platform handling on your own. You can definitely do that. There is library which builds, so the library that was suggested was this, async SSH. So this is an analog of paramiko, so it allows you to write and read to the channel pretty much. The library that is built on top of it, which is more similar to netmiko or to scrapli, would be netdev, this one. And I actually had a stream about it some time ago. Oh, it actually has a bunch of platforms supported, so you can definitely use this. But again, the problem is, as I mentioned, it uses async SSH. Where is this? It uses async SSH, which doesn't use SSH to libSSH2. So it's still it's okay, but it's still not as fast as it could be. And I actually think once I finish doing my testing, that the main test is going to be between scrapli SSH2 and async.io. And I have a feeling, at least from the numbers I have seen with smaller amount of devices, that it is comparable. So it's not like you will get a lot out of it. So yeah, just letting you know. But yeah, async.io is definitely interesting. It's just there are caveats. There are caveats with ecosystem. There are caveats with kind of like community awareness as well. But yeah. Okay, but we went on a tangent here. So we have, let's kind of summarize what we have been seeing. So 10 CSRs, netmiko was doing it 13 seconds, 13.9 to almost 14. And then scrapli was doing it in 2.3 seconds. For one device, we had 1 point something. No?
1.4 or something.
Yeah, 1.4, and then that one was 12. I don't want to scroll, but it was tested. Okay, so, and I think the one that you wanted was to use system, right? Or
yeah, I would just be curious. It'll probably be a little bit slow for sure, but I think it should be. In limited testing, it seems to be relatively comparable, at least with the low amount of threads.
have you seen my control F, find replace skills? Those are just insane, dude.
It's quality.
Okay. Parset, I'm not sure I understand your point. So the person wrote, I guess that the main thing is that the comments execute one after another synchronously. You have to clarify on, like, this is the main reason why I think I will not speed up a lot more. Let me think how I would be able to explain it correctly. So when you have it would be, so with async.io, it would be even faster if it would use libSSH2 on the backend. That is like, I am 99% convinced that would be the case. The problem is that no one wants to write those bindings for that library in async.io. And Carl, I don't know about you. I will not be able to even touch that specifically.
Yeah.
Since that is like doing protocol stuff and implementing that on the protocol level itself, vsync async is actually pretty hard. Like, my knowledge is that, like, not even close to enough to build something like this. So that would give you a speed up. But if you're using, there is still like some kind of ceiling that you will reach with the amount of simultaneous tasks that you can run, because your underlying C library is not able to deal with so many connections on your computer as well. Like, because there is, when you're doing SSH, there is also some processing involved, like around crypto stuff and stuff like that. And when you start scaling it up to like very huge numbers, your actual CPU starts to becoming a bottleneck there as well. So it's interesting. But yeah, so from what I have seen, based on the evidence I have seen so far, that scrapli using SSH2 in threaded will be very close to async IO. It will probably be a little bit slower, but very comparable. So just letting you know. Okay, so and I think I changed it and I didn't run it, correct? Yeah. So you want to see this? Let's go and do this. So we had what? I already forgot. 2.3. Okay. Okay, so this is definitely slower, but still faster than netmiko is.
Yeah.
So
That's interesting. It's I think when you tested before, it was significantly slower than SSH2, but in my testing, it's been pretty consistent
Oh,
with
it's
like 10
actually
threads.
weird times. The variation here is very weird, dude.
Yeah,
Wow.
that's interesting. Maybe that first one was a weird outlier.
Yeah, I have a feeling this is about the like how much time it takes for the device to respond. I meant that there might not be a lot of point to use async IO. There is still a lot of benefit to use async IO because you can pair it with a sync web framework, and you may have non-blocking views. So like the typical way you would want to deal with network interaction from the web would be to use workers. And if you use something like async IO, you technically can simplify your architecture of not using workers at all. Because you will be just, when you send your network interaction, it doesn't block anything. So you can process more views as they go in. So there's still benefit, but yeah, it should be all test. So I don't know what happened there with that 6 seconds, but now it's like around 4.8. It's still like twice slower, right? Because we had 2.3.
It's not too bad. I'll take it.
Yeah. You know what? Just for the sake of this test, I think let's just do paramiko, right? And see, like, because then it uses the same transport as netmiko. So be interesting to see that as well. So we had what, 13.8, and I think 12.8. So like around 13-ish seconds. Okay, this is taking. Oh wait, I used netmiko again. Okay.
Well, consistently 13-ish. That's good at least.
Yeah, 13-ish.
Yeah, that's a cosmetic bug at the moment. Everything should work. I run into that occasionally.
Is it yeah.
If you print all out, but it'll be there.
Okay. 2.76. Actually, we can, since we were running netmiko script before, right? We can check the banner.
Yeah.
Yeah, using scrapli. Okay, so 2.7. So SSH2 was 2.3, and paramiko was 2.7. Let's just run it again. Around 3-ish. And I think this problem only comes up in threads, but I don't know why.
No, it happens. It happens when I do my functional testing too. I just haven't fixed it
Okay.
because all the tests passed. So I've just been like, I'll get to
Okay.
it on my list.
Okay. And yeah, so you can folks definitely see the difference. So before I will summarize, because I think it's a good time to wrap up. We're almost at 3 hours. Let's discuss some other stuff that you have been working on regarding scrapli, stuff that people should be aware of. So yeah, let's start with probably nornir scrapli, right?
Yeah, nornir scrapli is pretty beta at the moment, but I know some folks are kind of playing around with it. It right now it's set for nornir 2. But it works. It needs some doc love and some of that. I was working on it a little bit yesterday. So the develop branch of that is in a pretty good shape right now. I think I'll probably end up making a release, and that'll probably be the last one that'll support Nornir 2, just because we're already obviously working on the Nornir 3 stuff. And then I'll probably make another release of it relatively soon that'll support Nornir 3. So we'll just, if you're using Nornir 2, you would just have to pin to the previous version. But yeah, I mean, it exposes the main kind of scrapli points in Nornir. So pretty much exactly like if you've used netmiko and Nornir, it should be pretty much the same thing, just with scrapli. So works pretty well.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I've been using this already and it's working pretty well. I think my only kind of like my personal thing that I didn't.
I fixed your complaint. I think
You did? You fixed the
yeah,
result
yesterday.
thing? Wow.
Yeah,
Okay.
yesterday.
Okay, cool. So yeah, I had, then never mind. There was some issues dot result or something like that.
Yeah. It was some dirty code that I did that Dimitri called
Let
me
me
up.
see.
It's only in develop though, so don't look at that.
It's not in mastery? Okay.
No, not yet.
Okay,
So now there's a result file in there, and now no more set adder.
Wait, what is happening here? Send command. Oh, you created scrapli result.
Yeah. And
Dude,
then it's just subclasses Nornir result.
That's very cool. Where is it? Let me find it. Here. So yeah, it has scrapli response. Okay.
Yeah. A little bit better.
Does it have? Let me go to example again.
Docs are probably not all that up to date right now either.
Okay, so you do send command from your thing, get command results. When you do dot result, what do you get?
The actual dot result string.
The string, yeah. Okay, but you still have dot scrapli response instead of set other thing. Okay.
Yep.
Okay, cool.
It probably needs a little bit of TLC still, but it's better than it was. Definitely better than it was.
So yeah, I can either do dot result to get string or can do dot scrapli response and then do like textfsm parse output or something, right?
Yep, exactly.
Okay, cool. Yeah, so I've been checking this out. It's working well. Now let's also talk about some other thing, because we are in 2020, right? We are trying to use APIs.
Yeah.
It's not working out so well sometimes, but we are trying.
Yeah. So I think I assume you're talking about the NetConf stuff.
Mm-hmm. Honestly,
yeah,
I thought you would call it scrapconf.
Maybe I should have. I don't know. Yeah, so this project is unfortunately stalled for, you can see, like a month of no work, because I kind of realized there was a couple of things in Scrapli that needed to get some TLC. But basically, the idea of Scrapli NetConf is to just extend Scrapli, because pretty much every network vendor, or at least Juniper and Cisco, the ones I care about, basically NetConf is just happening on a different port with a different subsystem over SSH. So there's no like if you look at NC client, it's paramiko, so there's no reason you couldn't do NetConf with Scrapli as a base. And then the goal or the idea with this would be that you would have a scrapli like interaction, scrapli like docs, scrapli like type hinting, scrapli like testing, consistent whether you're using telnet, SSH, or netconf over SSH. So that's the main idea. So right now it's really super beta. I definitely wouldn't recommend anybody use scrapli netconf yet. But I've just been kind of going through the RFCs and trying to implement all of the netconf methods that we need to implement. So get configs, dealing with filtering, all of that kind of stuff. So it basically just extends Scrapli and does netconf type stuff.
So tell me what is implemented in like what needs to be implemented, because I'm like, this is something very interesting to me. I haven't checked it out yet, but
it's a good question. It's been a month, so I don't know that I have
you don't
a
have to
fresh
be
memory
like
about it.
100% precise, but just something you remember.
So so we should have tests covering, or there's no tests yet, but we should be basically covering most of the base methods. Filtering is maybe a little bit hokey right now, but we should have get config, edit config, commit, discard, lock, unlock. And then there's a bare RPC method. So like if you're familiar with Juniper, they just have like RPC calls over netconf where there's no model.
Like get
right?
device information or something like this.
Yep. So I've got that implemented. Obviously, if I work on Juniper stuff, I need to have that to do non-model based stuff. So I think those are kind of the methods that are implemented right now. Those should all work. Filtering is probably the wild card at the moment. I've been trying to figure out how to do that in the same way. But yeah, so it should work mostly. NetConf's an interesting beast because it's really it's still just screen scraping over SSH. It just happens to have a structured format. So as soon as I kind of realized that, I was like, wait a minute, I dislike NC client quite a bit. The docs are confusing. It feels like it's written by people that write Java, not Python. So I was like, I could probably do this, and then I was dumb enough to start, and then now I'm obsessed. So.
Yeah. Well, I guess it's a good thing that you renamed the library from NSSH. Well,
yeah.
I mean,
exactly.
NetConf is also SSH, but still, right? Like,
the only caveat to Scrapli NetConf, because I was really trying to stay 100% standard library, but like you just saw, LXML, because dealing with standard library XML sucks. So it has one requirement.
That's dude, I have no problem with, we are still in Python world. When you get a dependency and you get like up to, I don't know, 100 sub dependencies, it's not JavaScript where you do one and then you have like 5,000 packages installed. So let me try doing that, let's see how beta is your beta.
It should work. I don't know. It works against my lab, at least. That much.
It works on my computer. Okay.
Yeah.
So
I'm gonna just Slack you like a whole. You have iOS XE though, right? Not XR.
Yep.
Or do you have an XR handy?
I have XR as well, but probably I'll do XC since I'm mostly familiar with XC. Okay, so I do need port, right? Port.
Yeah. Actually, no, because it'll default to 830. Scrapping.
Okay, and I still can use SSH too, right? For this?
No, maybe. I don't know. I think I've only tested it with system.
Ouch. Okay. Well. Let me.
Yeah, I was making some good progress, then I got sidetracked with work and then regular Scrapli, and then the Nornir 3 stuff and redoing the Ansible inventory sidetracked me pretty good.
Yeah, I know how it is when you're doing some open source or any kind of coding. Excuse me. Okay, so I need to open a connection here. And we will just get config. I don't have mental power to do a config.
That's probably good.
If you know what I mean. Okay,
Yep.
so in result, what do I get? Do I get XML here as a string?
Ooh. Yes, I think so. It subclasses the regular scrapli result, if I remember correctly.
NETCONF response is response. It seems you pretty parse it as a result, or
Yeah, I think I do because I think that's what NC client did. So I was trying to just kind of be kind of feature parity. But it's been so long that I don't want to say that and be wrong.
I don't know. Okay, let's try this and let's see what happens.
If it doesn't work, sorry.
It, yeah. Well, something is happening.
Yeah.
This
Hey.
input bytes input.
Uh,
Oh, no, it's 1.1.
If you try it with system, I wonder if it works for transport. Because that should work. Or at least it works on ISXR and Junos. Uh-oh.
Okay, we tried. So there is
Yeah.
something with I don't know. It goes to. Well, I guess I can go to debugger here and kind of because it seems like
Wondering.
it gets there because this is
Yeah.
this is a response, so it's strictly fails on parsing.
Yeah. I think it's. I wonder if I changed something in base Scrapli because I haven't been testing Scrapli NetConf lately.
I did a mistake with doing locals here. Huge mistake. Okay, so we are at line 133 here. Result R3 for result in result section. Let's do one more time. Oh no, it actually
Unicode issue, of course.
frame up here.
Yeah.
Okay, so somehow it, I don't know, something is happening there, but at least you can get it. Result 1 R strip. Actually, that line just works just fine. But
It's weird.
Oh, so E3 from string on this doesn't work.
I wonder if it's. I haven't tested at all with IO6E, so I wonder if it returns something different that I haven't accounted for yet.
Okay. Yeah, whatever. It's fine. But this is something that you're interested in or adding or
Yeah, I'm gonna keep working on this
okay.
for sure. It's just been significantly delayed.
Yeah, it's okay. I also have problems with NC client. Their API feels weird. There is a lot of dynamic attributes there in some places, like
Yeah,
so you lose
that's
all
the
out
one
the
that really gets
completion.
me.
Yeah, you
Yeah,
lose all out the completion whatsoever, and you're like, okay. It's actually interesting. There is an example with streaming telemetry over NetConf that you can find on the internet, and it uses forked version of NC client or something. And unless you're using that fork, like it will not work because it uses some extra dynamic operation defined on the object that you cannot even inspect or something.
thanks.
That yeah. So I also have my personal issues with NC client, even though I actually do have some code which is running where I'm running NetConf with this. But yeah, tell me this: would you consider Scrapli as of today production ready? And if not, what would it take?
I think probably yes. I think the main thing that I've been kicking around that we ran into today would be dealing with adding a method for send config singular.
Mm-hmm.
I think today drove that home for me, so I think I'll probably add that. Um, and then at that point, I would say yes, with the only exception being like it's been tested in a pretty narrow amount of devices, right? Like, I
Mm-hmm.
mean, it's tested against real devices, which is great. And I've tested it over like tethering on my phone, VPNing back home into my lab, and like trying to make some kind of crappy connections and
Mm-hmm.
uh, you like uh, adding artificial delay on like the host that's running the internet lab to make the connections really lossy, and it works, assuming you handle the timeouts and stuff. So those things are good. There's definitely going to be some prompt patterns that aren't matched. Like I've had a few folks kind of message me and saying, "Hey, this doesn't work," and then I just have to add like modify one of the prompt patterns.
Mm-hmm.
That's really really critical to Scraply, and obviously I've seen a small slice of all of the possible prompt patterns. So I think it's a long way to say that I think yes, it's probably production ready, um, with some caveats, but like no other caveats that you wouldn't have on any kind of other open source project.
Right. Okay. Cool. I actually agree with you. Like, and for me personally, speed plus good API really what made me pay attention to this project more closely. Like, because I'm the kind of person who is like, there is new tool on the in the community. I'm like, yay! Like,
Yeah, yet another one.
yet another one mindset, and like, why would I want to waste my time on learning it? Like, if I have tools that already work, like, and I'm always very skeptical about these new tools, especially if this tool solves a problem which is already solved by something else.
Yep.
Um, and I can tell you that, like, after very first experience, uh, like I realized that okay, this is exactly what I need. If I need to fall back to screen scraping, then this is definitely the libraries that I want to use. It has speed, it has typing, it has auto completion, so like it has proper like this the way at least I like of returning arguments, that there is no like union of myriad of things that it can return, but it's actually very strict about okay, this method
Yeah.
returns this type and this method returns this type, which allows you to better do type checking across your program. So,
There's still some
and
unions in there, so don't hold me to
I,
that. But
I
for the
mean,
most part, it's pretty
I,
accurate. Yeah.
yeah, I know that there are unions because at least you accept some like either string or list in some place. That's okay, but especially on the return as a return argument, this is actually makes even more difference because like if you use something like PyCharm specifically, because I don't think VS Code actually deals with typing properly right now, but with PyCharm, if you say that your function returns scraply response, right? Then now you have all auto completion after the dot for that result, which is huge. Um, like it saves so much time during development, especially like you don't even have to look in the docs. Like I remember that it was called something called textfsm, right? I just press T and it's over there, right?
Yeah.
So yeah. Um, before we do like final summary, do you have anything you want to add about the something that we didn't cover maybe? Because I will definitely.
No, I I think the only other thing, I've tried to make it well tested, and so it's not just fast and a good API. Like I'm trying to do my best to make it well tested. I don't know if I've always succeeded, but I guess that gives me more confidence when I make a new release, that it is ready for people to use. Like obviously, we can't test for everything, of course, but hopefully the test cover. I've got like greater than 80% unit test coverage right now.
Nice.
Finally, which is good. And some of the stuff that's left is kind of hard to test for, and I probably won't be tested for realistically. But and then obviously with functional tests running against the real devices, we get pretty close to full test coverage. So I think
Wow,
that's
very cool.
helpful or
So
good to know at least.
before I do a summary, tell me, let's say platform is not supported, right? And well, I need it to be supported. What are my options?
So if you just want to do it for yourself, I think we talked quite a bit about how to do
Mm-hmm.
that. Generic driver, build your privileges, build your on open and on close
Mm-hmm.
methods, functions. And then that's really all, unless there's some kind of special stuff to consider, that should be it. Um, Obviously, I've kind of tested on a narrow subset of devices, but like I have a wireless controller that I was able to basically build a driver for just as a
Mm-hmm.
proof of concept with very little effort. So that's the idea, is it should be extensible and kind of having that on open function be a callable. You can handle kind of anything. So like I know like Palo Alto firewalls have like prompts that you have to deal with when you log in, but you can
Mm-hmm.
handle all of that. And you can handle it all with generic driver. So you don't need, and like the hope is that you don't need a bajillion drivers, because that becomes a maintenance nightmare. That all said, so you could do that yourself. And then that's, with that out of the way, like if you really wanted there to be another core driver in Scrapli, I would be open to adding more, assuming that it's easily spin upable in
Mm-hmm.
VRNet Lab. And then kind of the last thing is I've got kind of a Trello card to add maybe like a Scrapli community repo that would be kind of like best effort. I'll merge stuff in as long as tests pass, and kind of thing, for
Mm-hmm.
like adding Brocade or Nokia or whatever. Um, just haven't gotten to it yet. I
Do you
still want to
feel?
get back to Scrapli NetConf, so
Yeah,
I gotta stop adding
I'm
stuff to Scrapli.
not putting pressuring you to do anything. I'm just wondering so that people
Yeah, yeah,
also know. So with this last option, um, are you thinking about also like we did with Nornir, like you have a separate repo for your, I don't know, Brocade scrapli driver or something, right? And then
yeah,
it should be
yeah,
able to be pip
exactly.
installable. And is there any work required on your side to make that work or
A
not?
little
Not
bit,
much. Okay.
yeah. Well, probably it depends how I want to do it. I
Okay.
guess would be the answer, of course. Like for transports, for example, I don't do any of the entry point kind of stuff that we're doing in Nornir. It's just pip install
Mm-hmm.
scrapli SSH2, and then that transport's available. And if that transport's not installed and you try to use it, it always module FM exception. So I think that would be the easiest way to do it. Obviously, it's not like super cool or anything like that, but it works and it's easy. So I think potentially you could kind of do something similar where you just pip install Brocade Scrapli, and
Mm-hmm.
then instead of creating a connection object from IOSXE driver or generic driver, you just create it from Brocade driver, and
Right.
then it just extends network driver. So you obviously have to have Scrapli installed, but of course you do.
Right.
And then kind of that would be it. And
I
then I've thought about adding like an auto discover, at least for the core platforms, but I guess that's kind of tangential to this, really.
Yeah, it's kind of becomes some that kind of magic. It
Yeah,
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 it could become complex very fast as well.
yeah. Well, if it stays 5 core drivers, maybe it's not that big of a deal. Like you can tell if it's a Juniper driver like device as soon as you connect to it, because the prompt's different. It's
Hmm.
easy. So it could be really, really easy if it's only 5 platforms that you're
Okay.
supporting. I don't
Cool.
know. I don't know that I want to do it.
Tell me another thing, and so I know that David Barroso has set up sponsorship for the Nornir. I don't know if you have seen this option. And one of the
Yeah, yeah.
like option is that sponsorship is that you pretty much support the project and you request some feature with that support. Like you pay money for the feature pretty much. Are you considering doing something like this for the platforms, or not really that much?
I mean, I guess I'd be lying if I said I hadn't thought about it, but I
Mm,
think it's so early that I haven't given it any serious thought.
okay.
Like we got 40 whole stars on GitHub. It's not like there's enough traction to consider that. Like in a
Yet.
perfect world, sure, that'd be cool, and I would love to do that, and I think it would be awesome, fun, cool. Um, but yeah, definitely not yet. At the very
Okay.
very least.
Okay. By the way, what happened here? Is it?
Scrapli is just still under my name instead of the. I
But
haven't moved.
not everything is here, or
Yeah,
you
yeah.
have.
Scrapper's under Carl Montanari, and everything else is gonna eventually go under the Scrapli. I just
Mm,
haven't moved Scrapli yet.
okay. Well, from another side, there was 0 stars until February, right? So until
Yeah,
late February. So I
yeah,
remember that scene where I had my first star, so I'm happy with
yeah,
that.
yep. You got the
uh,
very first one.
yeah. Okay, so let me do summary, and then you have some last words before we close this out. So
Yep.
today, Carl was joining me, and we were discussing his library called Scrapli, and also some other extra libraries that he's working on. So integration is nornir, Scrapli, and also the NetConf one. So Scrapli NetConf. Technically, this is a library which allows you to do screen scraping with network devices. It can use SSH, it can use Telnet. It can use a bunch of different transport like system, OpenSSH client. It can use libSSH tool backend library. So a bunch of different options for your transport. Um, it is very fast, as we have seen. We have tested it against netmiko. We have seen around 5 to times 9, I think, speed increase between those two, which is pretty awesome. So this is at least one of the reasons why I like Scrapli. Another big reason why I personally like it is because it has very good API and very good documentation. In terms of API, it has very clear defined things that you get. So instead of like getting like raw strings or something, you actually get a response object like in any other connection library, let's say requests or HTTPX or pretty much any other library. They all deal with the response objects, and on that response object you have like, oh, let's say raw response, and then I don't know, parsed response or something like this. We have kind of similar concept here in Scrapli, which I really like because it simplifies your type checking. Like your IDE can also know what the result is going to be after you execute that function. So yeah, I guess there's three things. So docs, speed, and actually for reliability, which kind of comes into like how it is implemented, that doesn't have any timers, and then response object. So these four things, I guess, are the main reasons why I personally use Scrapli. Um, I Yeah, it's pretty easy to get started. The docs page is pretty awesome. It describes everything you need to know to get started. So I can definitely recommend to everyone to check it out if you don't yet. And I personally will keep a close look at Scrapli NetConf. Um, yeah, I'm not putting any pressure on you. Like you already did a lot for community, Carl, and I appreciate your effort and your contribution to community. So great work on this library. So
Thank you.
thank you so much for your work. All right. With that, Carl, some last words and how people can find you online.
Yeah. I guess I don't have too much to say, but if you're interested in using Scrapli, definitely give it a shot. I'm easy to find on Network to Code Slack. Carl or Carl Montanari. I don't know what my username is, but it should be easy to find. One with a silly picture of me hiking. Carl Montanari on Twitter. But yeah, definitely hit me up. If there's any issues with Scrapli, I expect there to be more issues. So I very much appreciate people finding issues and reporting them and letting me know, so Scrapli can kind of keep on keeping on. It's kind of become a passion project, so just want to keep building it, making it cooler, I guess. So yeah, definitely. Any feedback is good feedback. Just don't be too mean.
Don't be mean at all.
Yeah, don't be
Carl
mean.
put a lot of effort into this, and yeah, I could definitely tell from my first look at this library. And probably I will add from myself. There is also on Network to Code. There is Scrapli channel right now, right? So
Yeah.
the discussion about the projects could go there. And yeah, thank you so much, Carl. I was your host, Dmitry, and I will post this recording as soon as I can, which probably takes me another week or so. But thank you so much for everyone who joined, for subs as well. I appreciate your support, folks, and I will see you next time. Goodbye now.